This fine evening, we're going to be going over the War on Emergency Powers, a special report of the national emergency in the United States of America. And this is research that's been put together by hundreds of people throughout the ages, but particularly this specific report was published 10/31 of 2024, and we're going to go through it. I keep telling you guys vehemently and adamantly that there's no substitution for reading. I don't care who your mentors are or any of that. It doesn't matter if you don't apply yourself and you don't read for yourself. There's something about reading it, writing it, speaking it, teaching it that ingrains it deep within your mental faculties. And it also is a way with dealing with the deception, the fraud, the lying, the looting, the plundering, the pandering, the thieving, the robber barons have subjected everybody throughout the world to. So, excuse me. I do these videos once again just to help people because I know in their day-to-day life they are busy. There will be no visuals this evening. We're going to go through this report, and I do not have the exhibits that go with this report. I want you guys to understand that this was a court case that was sealed and hidden from the people for a purpose and a reason. And one of our fellow brothers out there managed to get lucky and track it down and get a copy of this report. And I want you to understand that this report was before the Supreme Court. It was never made public. They do not always publish the cases. And this was never rebutted or rebuked. All the evidence that goes along with it, the people are still trying to track down. As soon as I have it, you guys will all have it as well. But there is factual documentation and evidence from the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, from the Secretary of the State, Secretary of Defense, and it's documents of conversations between the heads of states, governors, so on and so forth, that actually explain what's truly going on. It was never meant to be exposed to the public in such a fashion. And these people took it and supplanted it into a court case because they wanted answers. So we're going to go through this. Study the Constitution, let it be preached from a pulpit, proclaimed in legislators, and enforced in courts of justice. You have rights antecedent to all earthly governments, rights that cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, right derived from the great legislator of the universe. I believe there are more instances of abridgment of freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power that by violent and sudden usurpation. We have given a special thanks to all the men who have spent years of their lives bringing this information to the public. And we must not forget the women who are not always in the foreground, but without whose undying support and endurance, this effort would be impossible. These men and women are true patriots. They not only need your support, but deserve it. Let us remember that the word patriot, as defined by Webster's dictionary, as follows: fellow countrymen, a person who loses and loyally or zealously supports his own country. Not everyone can afford to give the long hours of those on the front lines. Many others fear their government. Isn't it an outrage that the actions of our government leaders cause many to not trust them? Where have we gone? How much is your freedom worth? If you can not give your time, please give your support. The American agricultural movement and many other organizations need your help to continue their efforts to bring about the restoration of this nation. A few dollars a month in the form of purchasing information to pass on to others is not too much to ask. Wouldn't it be a tragedy to lose their efforts, from which we will all gain so much? Because they were $20 short and we failed to do our part, please become involved. This movement is too important not to do so. We need this report in the hands of all Americans, so we are not going to copyright it. Therefore, permission is hereby granted to reproduce this report in its entirety. We do ask, however, that you lend your support, if possible, by purchasing an original report to make copies from so that the quality will be maintained. Thank you, Paul Bailey. Introduction. To be able to call oneself American has long been a source of pride for those fortunate enough to live in this great land. The word American has always been synonymous with strength in the defense of BOF, not sure what the abbreviation is for, our highest ideals of liberty, justice, and PAG opportunity, not only for ourselves, but for those throughout the world less fortunate than we. America's great strength has always been her people, individuals laying their differences aside to work in partnership to achieve common goals. In our greatest moment, it has been our willingness to join together and work as long and as hard as it takes to get the job done, regardless of the cost. That has been the lifeblood of our great land. From America's inception, we have been a nation of innovators, unfettered by hidebound conventions, a safe harbor for captains unafraid to boldly charter a new course through untried waters. This courage to dare greatly to achieve great things has made our nation strong and proud. A leader of men and of nations from the very first day of her birth, and since the days of her birth, millions of men and women whose hearts yearn for freedom and the opportunity to make a better life for themselves and their families have journeyed, often enduring terrible hardships, to our shores to add their skills and their dreams to the great storehouse of hope known as America. The Pilgrims, the Founding Fathers, the pioneers, the framers, the brave men and women who have fought and endured to the end in war, both civil and international, this history of heroism and dedication in defense of ideas, both personal and national, has long been a treasured legacy of bravery and determination against all odds, which we have handed down like family heirlooms from generation to generation. For we are like family. We Americans, often quarreling among ourselves, but banding together in times of adversity to support one another and fight side by side against a common foe threatening our way of life. This bold and brash, brave young land has long given its best and brightest to lead our country to its lofty position in the world as a bastion of freedom and a beacon of hope for all peoples of the earth. For many, the dreams they had for America were dreams they never lived to see fulfilled, but it mattered not to them, for their vision for this nation was meant to last longer and to loom larger than a mere mortal lifespan. Our national vision of integrity and responsibility of concern for one's fellow man, the flame inside that demands of us that we shall not rest until there is peace and justice for all. These are the fundamental stones which, from the strong foundation of our national purpose and form the strong foundation of our national purpose and identity. And on this foundation rests not only the hopes of those blessed to live in this great land, but the hopes of millions throughout the world who believe in and strive for a better life for themselves and their children. For hundreds of years, the knowledge that America was there, proud, generous, steadfast, courageous, willing, and able to enter the fray wherever human rights were threatened or denied, has given many who may never see her shores the will to endure despite the pain, to continue trying against something insurmountable odds. To continue trying against sometimes insurmountable odds, yet without vigilance and constant tender care, even the strongest foundation shows the effects of stress and erosion. Even the most imposing edifice can eventually crumble and fall. So it is with nations and with a nation's spirit. We have seen in this second half of the 20th century great advances in technology, which have impacted every aspect of modern life. Ironically, though we are living in the age of communication, it often seems as if we have less time now to talk or listen. For most modern conveniences haven't gotten them off the treadmill. They have only made the treadmill go faster. Quietly yet rapidly, the small town values of communities and common purposes are vanishing. Instead of strength in numbers, we as a nation are increasingly being split into smaller and smaller competing factions, with the cry of every man for himself ringing through the land. It seems that the phrase divide and conquer has taken the place of one nation under God, indivisible, with truth and justice for all. Americans are retreating behind the locked doors of their individual homes, afraid to enjoy the sunset for fear of the darkness it brings. When and where did it all begin to crumble? How and why has America, which once was a nation whose strength united was so much more than the sum of its total parts, begin to break apart in bitterly opposing special interest groups? What will this frightening pattern of disintegration mean to the future of America and of those who live within her shores? Let it be remembered, and remembered well, the words of the Holy Bible. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And let us not flinch from facing the truth that we have become a nation desperately divided. With a long legacy of pride, determination, and strength and unity, how has it now come to this, that we are fighting ourselves? Finally, and most vitally important of all, what can we do to turn the tide before the values and opportunities which others before us fought and died to preserve are washed away in the flood to come? What you are about to see is the result of years of painstaking and meticulous research on the part of dedicated Americans gravely concerned for this nation's future. Please listen closely and give your undivided attention to this presentation. For our futures as individuals and free citizens of this mighty land depend upon it. We are not here to showcase personalities. The speakers could be any one of you here today. We are, first and last, concerned Americans much like yourselves, taking our stand in defense of the nation we love. Much effort has been expended and a great hardship endured by the American agricultural movement and many other organizations and individuals to bring this information to the public forum. There is a wealth of information about many of the problems we face as a nation today, written from a variety of viewpoints, but as with a deadly illness, there is usually a point of origin from which the threat first was given life. So, it is with the threat we as Americans face today, an illness which could prove fatal if we do not act quickly and in concert to cure the body politic before it dies from the disease within. Almost all of the problems we are facing today can be traced back to a single point of origin in a time of national trouble and despair. It was at this point, when our nation struggled for its survival, that the Constitution of the United States of America was effectively canceled. We are in a state of emergency. Report. The exhibits are not included in this document. Some of them may be in the future if originals can be obtained and scanned. We are going to begin with a series of documents which are representatives of the documents contained in this report. We will be quoting from, in many cases, reports, Senate and congressional reports, hearings before national emergency committees, presidential papers, statutes at large, and the United States Code. Exhibit 8 is taken from a book written by Swisher called Constitutional Development. Let's read the first paragraph. It says, "We may well wonder, in view of the precedents now established," said E. Charles Hughes, Supreme Court Justice in 1920, "whether constitutional government, as heretofore maintained in this republic, could survive another great war, even victoriously waged." How could that happen? Surely if we go out and fight a war and win it, we'd have to end up stronger than the day we started, wouldn't we? Justice Hughes goes on to say, "The conflict known as the World War had ended as far as military hostilities were concerned, but was not yet officially terminated. Most of the war statutes were still in effect. Many of the emergency organizations were still in operation. What is this man talking about when he speaks of war statutes in effect and emergency organizations still in operation?" In 1933, Congressman Beck, speaking from the congressional record, states, "I think of all the demandable heresies that have ever been suggested in the connection with the Constitution, the doctrine of emergency is the worst. It means that when Congress declares an emergency, there is no Constitution. This means it's death. It is the very doctrine that the German Chancellor is invoking today in the dying hours of the parliamentary body of the German Republic, namely, that because of an emergency, it should grant the German chancellors absolute power to pass any law, even though the law contradicts the Constitution of the German Republic. Chancellor Hitler is at least frank about it. We pay the Constitution lip service, but the result is the same." Hold on a second. This is going to be a good one, ladies and gentlemen. I have people from all over the world that follow me and constantly send me valuable information from people from all over the world that have spent their life and dedicated their life in one fashion, form, or another to bring forward this information. This information that we're going to go through tonight is so powerful. And like I said, it was put before the Supreme Court and everybody fell silent. In fact, they hid this case. All right, this is, as soon as we can get all the exhibits put together, this shit's going to get released to everybody, because everybody who gives a fuck should have an opportunity to at least indulge in the dialectical reform and literature of all of these different factions and groups that were created to effectively not only enact this diabolical plan, but to enforce it and keep it alive. It is still transpiring today, and nothing will change until the people start to understand what has actually transpired and what has actually occurred. All right. A lot of the times that I prevail in a court with people, it's nothing more than parlor tricks, guys. It's the illusion of a system that is actually functioning constitutionally. They only let people win because if they won any more than 98% of the time in the court system with the prosecuting attorney, everybody would get pitchforks and load their 45s. All right. They've got to simulate an actual judiciary. They've got to simulate that it's actually fair. They've got to simulate to a degree because they've got to keep you believing that there is justice in this land. And I'm here to tell you today, as I've been saying for so many years now, over 15 years solid now, that there has been an ongoing war since before 1812. We never won the war in 1812. Okay. We never were free from King George. We were never free from the crown. To this day, the states are considered colonies of the British crown. Okay. And there are a lot of researchers out there that will back me up on this that never spent a day in college. All right. They are vehement. They are adamant about what they do. They are passionate about what they do. Sometimes it's construed to be hostility and anger, but please do not let that deter you from listening to what these people have to say. They have put their blood, sweat, and tears into bringing you this information. They have lost their families. They have lost their friends. They've been considered nuts. They've been ostracized from most of the people in the general public, either because they don't have the backbone and spine to stand the fuck up and sound off like they got a pair. All right? And that's most instances what happens. I'll lose everything. I'll lose it all. Well, what does the Heavenly Father tell us? It is far easier to take a blind, broke man into the kingdom of heaven than it is to, and thread him through a needle, the eye of a needle, than it is to take a rich man on earth with all his materialistic possessions and walk him through the gates of heaven. All right. So if your fear is losing things, let me tell you something. You're losing everything. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. All right. Your friends, your family, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles are losing family members. You're losing your inheritance. You're being deceived. You're being robbed, raped, and pillaged. And if you're not keen enough to see it, then so be it. But if you do see it, at some point, you got to stand up and sound off like you got a fucking pair. At some point, you got to become vigilant. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about standing up and acknowledging there's a problem and then figuring out what the fuck you got to do about it. Because there is a path. There is a way. For every wrong, there is a right. For every trespass, there is a remedy. All right? So if you're brokenhearted, down and in despair, you've been beat up by this system, I think it's imperative that you listen to the rest of what I have to say and the information that's been shared with me. And we'll pray for those other gentlemen and women that are out there trying to collect the exhibits that go along with this court case. And I've been telling you guys to read the Power of Appointment Act 1951. You can write these down because I'm telling you right now, the information that I have stored and committed to memory in my brain, I don't write this shit down anywhere. It's just in my head, which is probably a travesty. So you got the Township Ward Maternity Act of 1921, Power of Appointment Act of 1951. You have the 73rd Congress, First Session, Volume 77, Part 1, where you're going to learn about how badass T. McFadden was and a number of other congressmen who really believed in America and the doctrines and sound principles it was founded upon. Okay? It's 1,176 pages. I suggest all of you read it. It's long, it's enduring, well worth your time and your commitment. You have the Bill of Exchange Act or Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881 as amended in 1882. It's critical to read this. You have the Trading with the Enemy Act of October 6, 1917 as amended in 1933. First read the initial act of October 6th, 1917, and then go read the amendments that were made in 1933. It's vital to comprehend this information so you can see what's actually transpiring and what you've been subject to. All right. Ignorance of the law excuses no one. Equity will not aid a volunteer. At this point, everything that you're allowing to happen, you are allowing it to happen, and there is no remedy for you until you stand up and sound off like you got a fucking pair. All right? And it's not always easy. You can buy a brass pair of balls for $5.95 off fucking eBay. You can put it in a warm cup of fucking coffee or tea and put it in your pocket if you have lost your testicles and can't find them. Sometimes just reaching down there and fucking feeling a warm pair of brass is just as fucking good. So if you lack the testicle fortitude to stand up and sound off like you got a pair, you can buy some for $5.95 on fucking Amazon, TikTok, whatever. Let's get on with it. Congressman Beck is saying that of all the demandable heresies that ever existed, this doctrine of emergency has got to be the worst, because once Congress declares an emergency, there is no constitution. All right. This is called the law of necessity. It's a military doctrine, okay, under hostile corporate takeover. All right. A constitution is a corporate charter. It is twofold. The organic constitution, ladies and gentlemen, is a trust document. And that is clearly evident in the preamble. But I say it is twofold because it is also a corporate charter, no different than the East India corporate charter when they were trading tea and everything else. Okay. We're going to want to study the Treaty of Ghent as well, ladies and gentlemen. All right, the Treaty of Ghent, the Charter of the Forest. The Magna Carta is good to study, but understand that it has no way to force any enforcement behind it because, as you know, a contract cannot be entered into under threat, duress, and coercion, which is exactly how the Magna Carta was created. I am not saying that the information within the Magna Carta is not valid. I'm saying that it's not binding as far as we see it legally speaking in the contractual world because it was done under threat, duress, and coercion vietis arms. Okay. However, the Charter of the Forest was not done vietis arms. It is very relevant. Okay. And it has a lot of power. And again, the Magna Carta has a lot of great information to glean from it that you can still enforce and use today, but I wouldn't use the Magna Carta per se, in a blanket statement. I might use some of the information from it, never referencing it, if that makes sense. He goes on to say, but the Constitution of the United States, as a restraining influence in keeping the federal government within the carefully prescribed channels of power, is moribund, if not dead. We are witnessing the death agonies for when this bill becomes a law. If unhappily it becomes a law, there is no longer any workable constitution to keep the Congress within the limits of its constitutional powers. Again, this is from Judge Beck. Excuse me, this is from a Congressman Beck. It doesn't in 1933. All right. So Beck is also agreeing with the judge in 1920. Like I tell you guys all the time, this stuff is 50 years in the making. What you're seeing executed today was planned 50 years ago. When we're talking about the whole COVID fiasco, make no mistake about that. Some ingenious, sinister fucker, along with his group of cronies, was planning this 50 years in advance to manipulate the population, to create a path for psychological warfare and social engineering and manipulation to manipulate the markets and to control the banking system. All right. This is, once was, spoken to me from a banker, a high ranking banker, that worked over in Switzerland. And the communication was this. There's 8,500 people that run the world, the entire world. There's a group of 8,500 people. And that gentleman was very close to being in that group. Okay. He worked with these people. He associated with them. He helped destroy nations. He helped inflate currency and depreciate people's value and steal their sweat equity, essentially through fiat. Okay. And the illusion of money. These guys are magicians. They're brilliant about what they're doing. As sinister as it may be, you at least have to recognize that what they're doing, there's a a glint of genius. All right. What Bill is Congressman Beck talking about? In 1933, the House passed the Farm Bill by a vote of more than 3-1. Again, we see the doctrine of emergency. Once an emergency is declared, there is no constitution. The cause and effect of the doctrine of emergency is the subject of this report. In 1973, the Senate report 93-549, the first sentence reads, since March the 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. Let's go back to, they're saying Exhibit 9. Again, we don't have any of the exhibits. Like I said, this was submitted into a court case, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? And this is the transcript from the case. Let's go back to Exhibit 9 just before this. What did that say? It says that if a national emergency is declared, there is no constitution. Now, let us return to Exhibit 10. Since March the 9th of 1933, the United States has been, in fact, in a state of declared national emergency. Now, in 1933, what people don't realize is there was more than just one emergency declared. Now, if you go read the 73rd Congress First Session, Volume 77, Part 1, which I constantly stress to people to go read, you will understand that there was also an agricultural emergency declared. It wasn't just a banking emergency. There was an agricultural emergency, a housing crisis. Okay. There were a number of emergencies. And today, I think there are still 5 that are currently active, according to the Department of Defense, who has done an extensive research. And what they found was there are 5 that are definitely, without question, national emergencies that are still in force, weight, and effect. Okay? And we'll go through those a little bit later. Referring to the middle of this exhibit, this vast range of power taken together confer enough authority to rule the country without reference to normal constitutional process. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military force abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and, in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all Americans. And this situation has continued uninterrupted since March the 9th of 1933. But my research goes a little deeper than that. You see, because as I said so eloquently articulated to you earlier, we never won the War of 1812. The Civil War, there was nothing civil about it. Okay? The war was never ended. Abraham Lincoln, under executive order, compelled the Congress to reconvene underneath military war powers, not as the President of the United States, but as the commander-in-chief of the largest standing army the world has ever seen. Genghis Khan couldn't touch the United States military and the force that they have and the respect that they compel. All right? I don't think people really understand how badass the military-industrial complex of the United States is. All right? It's absolutely amazing. And I stand in awe when I really sit back and I look at it, because it's not just what you can see. It's so much more developed and deeper than that. So many different black sites, black projects, aerospace engineering. It's all part of that military industrial complex. Okay. And it is massive. There are, believe it or not, agencies that don't even answer to the commander-in-chief or the president of the United States. They are above his pay grade. All right. And a lot of people don't realize that. And I'm here to tell you right now, there are security clearances that exceed the president of the United States. He is on a need-to-know basis when it comes to these black sites. You want to know why the DOD loses $21 trillion and doesn't answer for it? That's because of all the operations that exceed and go far beyond the authority and the knowledge of the president or the office of the president. Okay? They're not just squandering $21 trillion on midget strippers and hookers. All right? There are things that are far beyond most people's capacity to comprehend. There are a multitude of governments that are, for all intents and purposes, not answerable to the government that the people of the United States of America think they formed. Okay? And yet we fund it all through our ignorance. So they're saying that this all really came about in 1933. In 1933, let me tell you what came about. They decided to stop hiding it. They decided to start telling the truth in bits and pieces, because one of the things they have to do is they always have to publish what is actually going on. They're not compelled to publish it in any one certain area or in any one set of volume of books, or to even publish it at every congressional hearing. Okay, it comes out in bits and pieces. For example, to prove my point, the whole COVID thing. The documents for COVID will not be released for 75 years, meaning everybody that was subjected to it, except for the youngest of the youngest, will probably not be alive to even know the travesty that everybody was subjected to and how dark and sinister it actually was. And 75 years from now, all those documents will be released and most people won't care to read them because it was 75 years ago. And the sad thing about that is, when those documents are finally released, you will see that everybody was treated as a lab rat. That they forced people to take injections because they were participating in a mass genocide production, because they have everybody's life insured. And when they created this bubble in the market, they had to collect so that the market, the financial industries wouldn't collapse. And how are they going to collect? They're going to collect on insurance. What insurance am I talking about? Pandemic bonds, pandemic securities. Okay? And in order for those pandemic securities and bonds to mature, a certain amount of the populace has to expire within a certain amount of time so they can declare it to be a pandemic. And therefore, they can liquidate those bonds, creating the new funds in the economy, and use them to keep the economy afloat. I guarantee you that will be released in 75 years. Some people have already figured it out. Has it been released yet? No. Will it be? Absolutely. That, without question in my mind, is exactly what transpired and is still transpiring today. Mass genocide in order to float the economy through what are known as pandemic bonds, which is an insurance policy. And in the insurance policy, it says so many people have to have expired in order to declare it a pandemic, in order to liquidate these bonds. And this situation has continued uninterrupted since March the 9th of 1933 in the introduction of the Senate Report 93-549. A majority of people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. Remember, this report was produced in 1973. The introduction goes on to say, for 40 years, freedom and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have, in varying degrees, been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. The introduction continues. And in the United States, actions taken by the government in times of great crisis have, from at least the Civil War, in important ways shaped the present phenomenon of a permanent state of national emergency. How many people were taught that in school? How could it possibly be that something which could suspend our Constitution would not be taught in school? Amazing, isn't it? Where does this come from? Is it possible that in our Constitution there could be some section which could contemplate what these previous documents are referring to? In Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution of the United States of America, we find the following words. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when in case of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Habeas corpus, the great writ of liberty, This is the writ which guarantees that the government cannot charge us and hold us with any crime unless they follow the procedures of due process of law. This writ also says, in effect, that the privileges of due process of law cannot be suspended, and that the government cannot operate its arbitrary prerogative, power against we the people. But we see that the great writs of liberty can, in fact, under the Constitution, be suspended when an invasion or a rebellion necessitates it. In the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, it says, "No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land of our naval forces, or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger." We reserve the charging power for ourselves, didn't we? We didn't give that power to the government. And we also said that the government would be powerless to charge one of the citizens or one of the peoples of the United States with a crime unless we, the people, through our grand jury, ordered it to do so through an indictment or a presentment. And if we, the people, don't order it, the government cannot do it. If it tried to do it, we would simply follow the writ of habeas corpus and they would have to release us, wouldn't they? They would not hold us. But let us recall that in Exhibit 13 it says, "Except in the cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in times of war or public danger." We can see here that the framers of the Constitution were already contemplating time when there would be conditions under which it might be necessary to suspend the guarantees of the Constitution. Also, from Senate Report 93-549, Exhibit 14, and remember that our congressman wrote these reports and these documents, and they're talking about these emergency powers, and they say they are quite careful and restrictive on the power. But the power to suspend is specifically contemplated by the Constitution in the writ of habeas corpus. Now, this is well known. This is not a concept that was not known to rulers for many, many years. The concept of the constitutional dictatorship went clear back to the Roman Republic. And there, it was determined that in time of dire emergencies, yes, the Constitution and the rights of the people could be suspended temporarily until the crisis, whatever its nature, could be resolved. But once it was done, the Constitution was to be returned to its peacetime position of authority. In France, the situation under which the Constitution could be suspended is called the state of siege. In Great Britain, it's called the Defense of the Realm Act. In Germany, in which Hitler became a dictator, it was simply called Article 48. In the United States, it is called the War Powers. If that was, in fact, the case, and we are under a war emergency in this country, then there should be evidence of that war emergency in the current law that exists today. That means we should be able to go to the federal code known as the United States Code or United States Code, USC, and United States Code annotated and find that statute, that law in existence. And if we went to the library today and pick up a copy of Title 12 and went to Section 95B, Exhibit 15, we will find a law which states, now, for any of you that have been following me for a while, you know that Title 12, 95A, was moved to Title 50, 4305B2, and then it was supplanted in Statute 40, Statute at Large 411, Section 7E. The United States Code is more of a municipal code for Washington, D.C. It doesn't apply to the states per se, all right? It is a reference guide, but understand that it is not verbatim from the archivist of the actual congressional record that is kept and maintained verbatim. Okay? And it's very important to comprehend that. That's why when you're looking at the code sections in the United States Code annotated, when you get down to the bottom of it, you will always see a reference Those references are going to actually take you to the Senate hearings or the congressional meetings, and that's where you're actually going to find where these statutes get their force, weight, and effect, if they have any force, weight, and effect at all, because again, the law is specific. Words have power and they have meaning. What I'm trying to articulate and convey to you is always go directly to the source document, the foundation. Always get it directly from the record maintained by the archivist. The ones that create the Title I through Title 50, ladies and gentlemen, they're paraphrased. They're not 100% accurate, okay? They're easier to read in some instances, and they may help you develop a better understanding, perhaps. But Title 12, first of all, is not enacted into positive law. Title 12 is the banking code, okay? And you need to understand that Title 12, United States Code, Section 95B, was in fact repealed. They peeled it from one section of the code, and they repealed it to Title 50. And then they repealed it from Title 50, 4305B2, and they stuck it in the Trading with the Enemy Act. With the Trading with the Enemy Act is the trust indenture under the War Powers Act, under the executive orders, okay? The Trading with the Enemy Act is so important for you guys to read and comprehend it. It's written vague and ambiguous. I get it. It doesn't specifically name anyone. It talks about enemy belligerent combatants. It talks about allies of enemy belligerent combatants. You need to read it over and over and over again until you really comprehend what it is saying. It is the trust indenture for which you are an heir. You are a beneficiary of it, okay? And it's so important to comprehend because that's how you're going to be able to express the trust, all right? Trust law is the highest law in the land. And even with the Constitution suspended, purportedly, allegedly, okay, saying that the Republic no longer exists, allegedly, I'm here to tell you it does, but you have to have a comprehension of how it works and why, because you will be tested by people that are gatekeepers, otherwise known as the Watchers. They exist. It's reality. You don't have to like it, but it is what it is. So Title 12, United States Code, and went to Section 95B, Exhibit 15, we will find a law which states, again, United States Code is not law, all right? You want to go to the statutes at large, you want to go to the Constitution, when you want to find the law. It says, Title 12, 95B, the actions, regulations, rules, licenses, orders, and proclamations heretofore or hereafter taken, promulgated, made, or issued by the President of the United States, of the Secretary or the Secretary of Treasury since March 4th, 1933. They went proactive. See, this was established March 6, 1933, and they went proactive and backdated it to March 4th, 1933. And the reason that I can affirm that is because I do my due diligence. There's no substitution for reading. I went and read the 1,176 pages of the 73rd Congress First Session, Volume 77, Part 1, which is exactly where they put together and contrived Title 12, United States Code, Section 95B, before it was repealed. It doesn't actually say this verbatim. The actual law reads a lot clearer than this, and you will find it in the Trading with the Enemy Act, 40 Statute at Large, 411, Section 7E. It's much more voluminous, and it has a lot more force, weight, and effect. The reason that they had to do this retroactively and backdate it to March 4th, 1933 is there was a proclamation that was issued, Proclamation 2039, as of March 4th, 1933. Okay? And they needed to encompass the proclamation. And to verify what I'm saying, you simply go to Title I, United States Code, 112 and 113, and read it very carefully, very slowly and methodically, study each word and comprehend the intent behind it. And then you read 40 Statute at Large, 411, Section 7E, and you will be able to pierce the veil and come outside of the proverbial box you've been put in mentally, which has constantly since your birth kept you in a state of perpetual confusion and involuntary servitude. And the reason I say it's involuntary servitude is because if you actually knew what was going on, there is no fucking way that you would be volunteering anymore. The actions, regulations, rules, licenses, orders, and proclamations heretofore and hereafter. Heretofore and hereafter. Okay? Heretofore and hereafter are very important. Since March 4th, 1933. Promulgated, made, or issued by the President of the United States. At this point, they're telling you there is no longer an office of the President of the United States. It is a commander-in-chief only. That's the significance of Donald J. Trump in his first inauguration having the Judge Advocate General, which you can invoke a Judge Advocate General at any time, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, to help you along your case and to help justice prevail. And then he had the, what was the other gentleman that he had next to him? There were two of them. One was the Judge Advocate General, and the other one was from the USMCJ, JAG Division. All right? As the Commander-in-Chief, or the Secretary of the Treasury. The Secretary of the Treasury plays a key role in this Emergency Powers Act. Okay? All books, regulations, rules, everything goes through one of two offices, the Commander-in-Chief or the Secretary of Treasury. All right? Because they are administering a bankruptcy. The Secretary of the Treasury, since March 4th, 1933, pursuant to the authority conferred by subsection B of Section 5, B of Section 5 of October 6th, 1917. This is where they amended the Trading with the Enemy Act, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? But when you actually go read it in the 1,176 pages that I speak of in the 73rd Congress, First Session, Volume 77, Part 1, they will not refer to it as the Trading with the Enemy Act. They will just give you a date of October 6th, 1917. This is why I have so much admiration for the men and women before me who have dedicated their life to studying and gaining this knowledge, because it is not easy. It's a trail of breadcrumbs, and you have to be dedicated wholeheartedly to put this together. And keep in mind, the men and women before me were doing it without the advent of technology as far as internet, which means their thumbs were bleeding. They were bleeding to death of paper cuts. Their eyes were bleeding. They were reading book after book after book and harvesting the little nuggets as they went along. We're so fortunate for those people before us that saw that something wasn't right, that the Heavenly Father put something on their heart to let them know that their purpose is greater than themselves, and that they've been called to be about His good works. And they answered. They answered because it was a duty incumbent upon them to do so. And they spent their life digging through the literature to bring this forward to you guys. B of Section 5 of the Act of October 6, 1917, as amended, Title 12, United States Code, Section 95A. Title 12, Section 95A, number 1, doesn't exist anymore. Number 2, even if it still existed, Title 12 is not enacted into positive law, and pursuant to Title 1, United States Code 204, anything not enacted into positive law is prima facie evidence of law, which means it has the illusion of law. It looks like law, it smells like law, it feels like law, but when challenged, it will utterly fail because it is, in fact, not law. It has to be agreed upon in order for it to be binding. And that goes for anything not enacted into positive law, ladies and gentlemen. Are hereby approved and confirmed. March 9th, 1933, Title C1, Title 1, Section 1, 48, Statute 1. Now, statutes at large. This is where I'm talking about the sites where you actually go find the information that has force, weight, and effect that will be recognized as legal evidence in all courts from the highest to the lowest. So when you actually want to go see the source, you're going to go down to Section 148, Statute at Large 1, from March 9th, 1933, Title 1. And you're going to read it, okay? But I'll save you the arduous task, and I'll just send you right to where they revamped it, because that's really the focal point, which is in March 9th of 1933, instead of going back to October 6th, 1917. And for that, I will direct you to the Archivist of the United States, that's charged with the duty of maintaining the records, the true, correct, accurate, not misleading, verbatim records. Okay? That's where you want to go. You want to enforce the law, then you need to go to where it's located, and you need to use it verbatim. Words have power and they have meaning. And so you would go to 73rd Congress, First Session, Volume 77, Part 1, to harvest that information. And you will glean a lot from it because you will hear the arguments on the floor, the House of Representatives and the Congress assembled. You will hear them talking about the unprecedented grab for power and what this means for the American people. And you will find the true politicians who were there to serve the people. You will be able to see them in the way that they speak and their mannerism. There were a lot of them that were red-blooded Americans, and they were hot under the collar between March 4th and March 9th in 1933. All right, they attempted to assassinate T. McFadden over 9 times before they finally successfully succeeded. 9 times. That's how badass T. McFadden was. He was fighting for each and every one of you guys, and he didn't even know you because you didn't even exist. You were still a nut stain running down the wall. You were an illusion, a theory, a future, if you will. T. McFadden's purpose was greater than himself, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the call for you. The same call to T. McFadden is the same one to you. Is your purpose greater than yourself? You have to put yourself on the back burner and ask yourself, what's your reason why? Why are you going to stand up? Why are you going to write documentation? Why are you going to spend the time doing this? And if your reason why is greater than yourself, you will succeed. No questions asked, because failing is not an option. Now, what does this mean? It means that everything the president, which from here on out is going to be identified as the commander-in-chief, or the Secretary of Treasury, has done since March the 4th of 1933, or anything that the president or the Secretary of Treasury is hereafter going to do, is automatically approved and confirmed. They need not Congress's approval. This is huge to comprehend. Referring back to Exhibit 10, let us remember that according to the Congressional Record of 1973, the United States has been in a state of national emergency since 1933. First, we have the National Banking Emergency Act, and then we have the Agricultural Act, Emergency Act. Then we realize that Title 12, United States Code 95B, is current law. Now, they're making a palpable error here. They're calling it law. We know that it's not law because Title 12 is not enacted into positive law. It looks like law. It has a semblance of law. Some people are dumb enough to submit to it. But if you really want to go to the law, you're going to go to 40 Statute at Large 411, and you're going to see the new trust indenture they're operating underneath via the War Powers Act. This is the law that exists over the United States this moment, okay? If that be the case, let us see if we can understand what is being said here. As every action, rule, or law put into effect by the President, the Commander-in-Chief, or the Secretary of Treasury since March 4th, 1933 has or will be confirmed and approved, let us determine the significance of that date in history. What happened on March the 4th of 1933? On March the 4th of 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that scallywag, was inaugurated as President of the United States, referring to his inaugural address, which was given at the time when the country was in the throes of the Great Depression. We read Exhibit 16. I am prepared under my constitutional duty to recommend the measures that our stricken nation in the midst of a stricken world may require. These measures, or such other measures as Congress may build out of its experience and wisdom, I shall seek, within my constitutional authority, to bring to speedy adoption. But in the event that Congress shall fall, to take one of these two courses, and in the event that the national emergency is still critical, I shall not evade the clear course of duty that will then comfort me. I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency, as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe. It's important to understand the reason that this all came about in 1933 was because of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. Now, it was concocted in 1910 on Jekyll Island, as many of you have become keenly aware of. And in 1913, the scallywag Woodrow Wilson unknowingly, unwittingly, or maybe knowingly and wittingly sold out his fellow countrymen, okay, for frivolous fiat and a promise at the seat of the round table of the bankers. On March the 4th, 1933, at his inaugural, President Roosevelt was saying that he was going to ask Congress for the extraordinary authority available to him under the War Powers Act. Let's see if he got it. Now, first of all, it's very important for you to understand he didn't need to ask them for their permission in 1933. He already had the power because the war by Abraham Lincoln that was declared was never ended by proper proclamation, because he was euthanized before he had the time and ability to end the declaration of war with a proclamation. All right. So this is all just theater here in the public. Roosevelt's just putting on a show. Okay. Because it really doesn't matter what the Congress says at this point, because we've always been in a time of martial law. All right. It's always been the commander in chief since the first executive order was issued. On March the 5th, President Roosevelt asked for a special and extraordinary session of Congress in Proclamation 2038. He called for a special session of Congress to meet on March the 9th at noon. And at the Congress, he presented a bill, an act, to provide for relief in the existing national emergency in banking and for other purposes. Now, they always end their statements with "for other purposes." Those other purposes, not quite clearly defined, are always very important. And it takes years of studying to find what the other purposes were in many instances. Thankfully for all the people in the past, the men and women alike, that have done the research, we don't have to go through that painstaking, arduous task of trying to figure out what the other purposes were. And if it's not articulated in this document, I will freely share it with you later. In the enabling portion of that act, it states, "Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled." That statement, ladies and gentlemen, needs to stick out in your head. Any time that you hear it, "Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled," we are talking about a congressional record that's lodged at the National Archivist that is verbatim, word for word, their discussion and what they did and how they did it. It's the Congress being assembled, okay? It's where they cast the votes, the yays, the nays, in order to move forward with their agenda or cancel effectively a bill. That the Congress hereby declare that a serious emergency exists and that it is imperatively necessary. Okay, when we're using the word necessary and necessity, understand that all comes underneath the military doctrine, under the power of the DOD, under military occupation. Necessity is the law of military occupation and war. That's why they say necessity trumps the law, okay? Imperatively, necessarily, speedily, to put into effect remedies of uniform national application. Not uniform application of law, or not the law of the land, but uniform national application of their effective wants and needs under the declared emergency they created, by the way. What is the concept of the rule of necessity referred to in the enabling portion of the act as imperatively necessary speedily? The rule of necessity is a rule of which states that necessity knows no law. All right, it's a maximum of law. Necessity trumps the law. My need to forage for food trumps the law for me to have to go get a hunting license or a fishing license. I have an inherent natural right to go get food and to forage for food. Okay, out of necessity, necessity to nourish my body trumps all the bogus bullshit that they've drawn up as men, saying that I have to conform and get a habitat stamp and all this other stuff. Okay? Please do not misconstrue what I'm saying, because I enjoy getting a habitat stamp. I don't mind doing that. I like conservation of the critters and making sure that the critters are healthy and have food plots and things. Don't misunderstand. But when push comes to shove and Papa's hungry, Papa gonna fucking eat. And I don't give a shit what kind of tickets they issue. Papa gonna win that one too. All right? I got to put food on the table. And necessity trumps their bullshit law. All right? Not only that, but it's natural law that I have the right to forage for food. A good example of the rule of necessity would be the concept of self-defense, or the castle doctrine, right? The stand your ground law as they have created, right? But self-defense is a natural law. Okay? If we read the Bible before it was altered, tragically, there is a time to kill. There's never a time to murder. Murder is with ill will, bad intent, and unjustifiable. But there is a time to euthanize. And everybody should know that. You shall sell your cloak to buy a sword, a saber. All right? Let's not mince words here. Let's not get it mixed up. There is a time to fend for oneself and to fend for his country, his fellow loved ones, his community. Blessed be the peacemaker, but sometimes the peacemaker goes off with a big bang. The law says, thou shalt not kill. No, that is not what the law says in the Bible. In the Bible, it says, thou shalt not murder. King James changed the Bible to read, thou shalt not kill. Okay? And there's a difference here. And we need to understand that. It's important. But also know that if you are in dire danger, in danger of losing your life, then you have the absolute right of self-defense. You have the right to kill to protect your own life. That is the ultimate rule of necessity. Thus, we see that the rule of necessity overrides all other law and, in fact, allows one to do that which would normally be against the law. Well, it's a law of nature, survival of the fittest. Okay? If another bear can stave off another bear by using its teeth and its claws, it's going to do so. May the best bear win, right? It's that way. That's the law of nature and nature's God. We're no different than the rest that he has created. So it is reasonable to assume that the wording of the enabling portion of the act, notice the enabling portion, we're always looking for the enabling clause. We're always looking for the foundation. If it doesn't have an enabling clause, it doesn't have a foundation, then it's superfluous. And equity will not allow a statute to be used as a cloak for fraud. This is why there's no substitution for reading, because if you have a feeble mind and you're gullible, you'll fall for anything. And there's nobody else there to protect you from the heathens that are going to lie, loot, plunder, and steal from you, known as bar association members, attorneys, and judges. Although they look noble, and we've been led to believe they're noble, they're nothing more than mere mortal men who have ambitions and are blinded by the belief in the almighty fiat, living a little higher on the hog at your expense, to your detriment and their benefit, which is a violation of their oath. Of the Act of March 9th, 1933 is an indication that what follows is sometime which probably be against the law. It will probably be against the Constitution of the United States, or it would not require that the rule of necessity be invoked to enact it. Here's another word you need to put in your spank bank. Invoke. Invocation. You have to invoke the law for which you seek to enforce. You got natural law, maritime law, admiralty law. You got common law. You got the exclusive jurisdiction of equity. You got modes and procedures. Okay? When we're talking about law, you have exclusive, auxiliary, and concurrent jurisdictions. It's important to understand them. In the Act of March 9, 1933, in Exhibit 17, it further states in Title I, Section 1, the actions, regulations, rules, license, orders, and proclamations heretofore and hereafter taken, promulgated, made, or issued by the President of the United States or the Secretary of the Treasury since March 4th, 1933, pursuant to the authority conferred by Subdivision B5 of Section B of Section 5 of the Act of October 6, 1917, as amended, are hereby approved and confirmed. Again, I don't want you to misunderstand this. Section B5 is out of the Trading with the Enemy Act that was issued October 6, 1917. What was going on in history around that time? World War I, ladies and gentlemen. You'll find that the United States has been in a perpetual war and conflict since its inception. It has always been in a state of turmoil and emergency for now coming on over 250 years, or coming up to 250 years now. All right? We have read those words. This is the exact same wording as is found Exhibit 15 today in Title 12 USC 95B. The language in Title 12 USC 95B, which was repealed, moved to Title 50 4305B2, which is still there in Title 50. What is Title 50, ladies and gentlemen? Title 50 is the military code. Title 50 is the military code. Title 12 is the banking code. Why did they move a banking code to the military code in 1933? Because during time of hostilities and a hostile takeover using military force to force a nation to succumb to its authority under the War Powers Act, the DOD, Department of Defense, takes over all minerals, all financials, all houses, all farms, all oil, all mines, everything. During the time of a hostile military invasion and takeover, the military that is invading and enforcing on the land, ladies and gentlemen, takes over everything, including the fiat, the gold, the silver, the minerals, the water, the food, the grain, the fuel, the oil, everything. So this will help you understand a little bit more why 9/11 was so important to them. You see? 9/11 was another way to pass the Patriot Act, which sounds real patriotic until you read it. And it gave them the grounds to pass the National Defense Authorization Act, which makes you and me domestic terrorists. If you have more than 7 days food ration, if you have what they call quote unquote ample ammunition, which is vague and ambiguous, by its nature is void, because what I might consider ample ammunition might be peanuts to you. I mean, 1,000 rounds of .308, that to me seems ample. To you, that might seem like nothing, or it may seem extreme, right? But to each his own. But according to the National Defense Authorization Act and the Patriot Act, making us all terrorists here, by saying ample ammunition and being vague and ambiguous, 3 live rounds to the government could be considered as more than ample, which would make you a domestic terrorist in their eyes. By their own words. See, that's why the law is specific. Because if it's not specifically laid down, it's open to interpretation, which is exactly how the attorneys want it. Because argument and controversy is how they get paid, ladies and gentlemen. They're a lot like doctors. Doctors don't cure people, they treat the symptom. Why? Because providing a cure is bad for fucking business. Yeah, if you came here to have shit sugar-coated and spoon-fed to you, you at the wrong fucking place. I just tell it how it is. I don't have a fucking filter. It'd be like take it in the ass dry with a cactus. This is going to be rough. It's going to hurt. It's going to be abrasive. Don't care if it fucking hurts your feelings, because nobody gives a fuck about your feelings. This country was not founded by a bunch of meek, weak people. All right? They were a bunch of Billy badasses labeled as tyrants. The king wanted their heads, their testicles, their offspring annihilated from the face of the earth, and any existence of their lineage wiped from the face of the earth. The vigilance and the spirit it took to stand up and say fuck you is more than commendable. And we're losing her, ladies and gentlemen, at a phenomenal rate. Because people lack the knowledge, the comprehension, the perseverance, the strength, and testicle fortitude to put their big middle finger in the fucking air and say, fuck you, here's to me, while they grab their set of nuts. The language in Title 12, United States Code 95B, is exactly the same as found in the Act of March 9th, 1933. This is very important to understand. Ladies and gentlemen, an act does not abolish or repeal the organic Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. As much as they would like to tell you that the organic Constitution is not in force and effect, cannot be mentioned in any court, blah, 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 I'm here to tell you right now, grab your set of nuts and tell them, fuck off. Because acts don't abolish or amend the Constitution. Where do we find that? We find that we, the people, the framers, decided that only the people can change the Constitution through their representatives or through themselves by doing state assemblies. Nowhere in the Constitution, the organic Constitution, does it say that an act abolishes, repeals, or removes, or suspends the Constitution. It can only be done by a proper vote. Very important. So the Act of March 9th, 1933 falls underneath the Reorganization Act of 1871. 1871 is when the organic Constitution really got set to the side. The power to create can never be greater than its creator, which means they didn't have the authority from we the people who created their position in the first place to abolish the organic Constitution. So what they did instead in 1871 was they created a mere image of the organic republic and turned it into a commercial charter. It's exactly the same as that found in the Act of March 9th, 1933, Chapter 1, Title 1, Section 48, Statute 1, Statute at Large. The Act of March 9th, 1933 is still in full force and effect today. We are still under the rule of necessity, under hostile military takeover. This is why reading the Trading with the Enemy Act is so important. 40 Statute at Large, 411, Section 7E. I can't stress it enough, but I want you to read the entirety of Trading with the Enemy Act. Just don't run to the nugget, grab the nugget, and wield it around like Excalibur and not understand the power that you're harnessing and wielding by using 40 Statute at Large 411 Section 7E. You have to comprehend the entirety of the Trading with the Enemy. We are still in a declared state of national emergency, a state of emergency which has existed uninterrupted since March 4th, 1933, or for over 60 years. As you may remember, the authority to do this is conferred by subsection B of Section 5 of the Act of October 6, 1917, as amended. What was the authority which was used to declare and enact the emergency in this act? If we look at the Act of October 6, 1917 in Exhibit 18, we see that the top right-hand part of the page, it states that this was an act to define, regulate, and punish trading with the enemy, and for other purposes. By the year 1917, the United States was involved in World War I. At that point, it was recognized that there were probably enemies of the United States or allies of the enemies of the United States living within the continental borders of our nation in a time of war. Therefore, Congress passed this act which identified who could be declared enemies of the United States, and in this act, we gave the government total authority over those enemies to do with as it was saw fit. We also see, however, in Section 2, Subdivision C, in the middle, and again at the bottom of the page, other than citizens of the United States. Here's something that needs to be understood. there existed no citizens of the United States until the passage of the 14th fucking Amendment. Citizens of the United States are vagabonds, vagrants, slaves, serfs, subjects. All right? There were members of the Union of States. There was we the people. The whole nationality thing came about after 1871. There were citizens with a capital C, state citizens. All right? So citizens of the United States, what they're talking about after the Reorganization Act of 1871, and I have so many Supreme Court cases and lower state court cases that will tell you time and time again the difference between a citizen of a state and a United States citizen. And the fact that one of the Supreme Court justices says it's laughable because there isn't even anything that is a citizen of the United States. And I'm paraphrasing what he said. I think his exact words were, it's unfathomable that anybody could believe there is such thing as citizen of the United States. And I'll go through that document later. It's like 70 pages long, and it's nothing but Supreme Court cases and justices speaking of the lunacy of citizenship and how it was created. The act specifically included citizens of the United States because we realized in 1917 that the citizens of the United States were not enemies. Thus, we were excluded from the war powers over enemies in this act. The problem with that. Their theory is that they're United States citizens, so they're excluded. United States citizens are employees of the United States government. Okay, if you swore an oath, you fill an office, you get paid once a month from the United States government, you are considered a United States citizen or employee. Okay? It's a corporation. When you pledge an oath to the United States, you lose state citizenship. Okay? You forfeit all your natural, unalienable, unalienable rights. And you accept privileges and immunities, and now you're subject to the United States statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations, making you foreign to the several states or the union of states, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to clear that up. Section 5B of the same act, Exhibit 19, states that the president may investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of license. This is where the driver's license started to pop up. If you're a farmer, that's a term of commercial, agricultural, or industrial purposes, and therefore you're taxed. And you need a license. You need approval. You need permission. Or otherwise, any transaction in foreign exchange, export, or earmarking of gold or silver coin or bullion or currency, transfer of credit in any form other than credits relating solely to transactions to be executed wholly within the United States. What do they mean with in the United States? Guam, Puerto Rico, Swaney Islands, the Samoan Islands. Okay, Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, ladies and gentlemen, a 10 square mile area and federal enclaves, which means military bases, forts, arsenals, state capitals. Okay? That's within the United States. If you ask them to tell you geographically where the United States is located, they will show you 10 square miles that have been laid out with key guide stones. Again, we see here that citizens and the transactions of citizens made wholly within the United States were specifically excluded from the war powers of this act. We, the people, were not enemies of our country. Now, they're getting it wrong again. I should have read this first, but maybe this is a great educational opportunity. Now this may be why this failed in court. I can see it. Maybe they just lack the understanding. So we'll use it as an educational tool. We the people is the foundation, the creator of the government, to serve four purposes. Four. We the people are supreme and above government. We are the first branch of government because we created it. There are three branches of government after we the people that are answerable to we the people. The judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch. The executive branch is for business. The legislative branch governs and creates rules, codes, statutes, provisions for the employees of we the people, our representatives. And the judicial branch is for we the people to ensure that our right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and the enjoyment of property are never encroached upon. When you truly understand how the Constitution reads, it doesn't have fuck all to do with you and everything to do with them and the provisions and guidelines for which they are to operate within, and they are forever bound by. We the people are supreme. We the people are not to be confused as United States citizens. I often like to call them United States citizens. Okay? So when you hear U.S. citizen or United States citizen, understand that if you're not getting a fucking paycheck once a month from the federal government, then you're a liar. Because it's impossible to be a United States citizen until you swear an oath and an allegiance to the United States, which is the District of Columbia, which has its own fucking flag and is not part of the 50 states of the United States of America. Furthermore, there are not 50 states. There are only 48 states of the Union. Union of States, the several states. The other two were taken under hostile military occupation, and Russia was never fully paid for Alaska, which is why they want it back. We the people have our political domicile for our juristic person for political purposes is vested or domiciled in the 10th Amendment. That's your bundle of rights. No ex post facto laws, no bills of attainder, no letters of marque, no letters of reprisal. Nothing but gold or silver shall be tendered in payment for the tender of payment of debt. We the people don't owe an allegiance to the states, don't owe an allegiance to the United States, for we created it. We owe a duty to our fellow man to keep the employees of the United States and the several states in check, so they're not rape, robbing, and pillaging us. So they're not taking our grandmothers and sending them off to nursing homes while they fleece and take the estate. So upon death, there's no transfer of value and inheritance to the heirs. Think about this. Your family has been working for tens of thousands of years. And what do you have to show for all their hard work? Not a fucking thing. You want to know why? Because it was taken. It was taken from your family and bequeathed to the government, who squanders it to the tunes of trillions that they cannot account for. Your lineage were hard-working people, and I don't care where they hailed from. Do you think it's funny that the only families that really have anything to show for anything are 13 solid bloodlines that work together, play together, and stay together? They inherit castles and fancy art and massive bank accounts and have multitudes of trusts. Yet nobody else out of 7 billion people, other than 13 bloodlines, has anything to show for their lineage's hard work over tens of thousands of years, working in harmony and unity. Think about that. So we need to come back together as a people to reclaim and restore what was intended. Not for our benefit, but for our future offspring, for our future grandbabies. To be yet again a beacon in this world of hope for those that are less than fortunate in other countries. To lead by example. We the people were not enemies of our country. Again, this is a misnomer. The United States is not a country, ladies and gentlemen. It is a corporate charter. To be engaged in commerce is to be engaged in war. Commerce is a game of war. Outbidding the other person, outsmarting him, finding it cheaper. Constantly at war. So another misnomer here. Because we, the people, are considered the enemies under the Trading with the Enemy Act. And you have to comprehend why. A small debt creates a debtor. A large debt creates an enemy. And ladies and gentlemen, the United States owes you to the tune of trillions. The national debt belongs to we, the people, who are due and owing. And that's why you have a birth certificate making you the holder in due course. They've muddied the waters a bit, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying as long as you're holding that ticket, we don't have to redeem it. People guard them stupid things like their life depends on it, collecting dust in their closet, parading them around all their friends. Oh, I got it authenticated. Look at this. Look at this. It's bound together. Full faith and credit of the United States. And they have no idea that by holding on to it, they've accomplished nothing. You need to go look up the word usufruct. And if you don't understand what usufruct is, let me tell you, and be the first one to tell you, usufruct. We're going to keep going on. Therefore, the government did not have total authority over us as they were given over our enemies. Again, they didn't have total authority or power over us in the first instance. Remember, they're operating now under the Reorganization Act of 1871. They hold dual capacities. There are multiple jurisdictions running concurrent simultaneously. Every day, there are still constitutional officers that exist. And one of them is the Treasury, ladies and gentlemen, a constitutional authority. A constitutional office. It is important to draw attention again to the fact that citizens of the United States, in October 1917 were not called enemies. Consequently, the government under the war powers of this act did not have authority over us. They've never had authority over us, ladies and gentlemen. We were still protected by the Constitution. Granted, over enemies of this nation, the government was empowered to do anything it deemed necessary, but not over us. The distinction made between enemies of the United States and citizens of the United States will become crucial later on. Again, they've made a palpable error here, and we'll make those corrections. Because in order to be a citizen of the United States, what must you first have to do, ladies and gentlemen? That's right. You have to swear an oath, which makes you foreign under Title 8, which is the Immigration Act and Code. Once you take an oath, you become foreign. You no longer enjoy your unalienable natural rights under state citizenship, okay, through the Union of States. And the several states joining together in compact to form a more perfect union, you then and there become part of Washington, D.C., an employee. In Section 2 of the Act of March 9, 1933, Exhibit 17, Subdivision B of Section 5 of the Act of October 6, 1917, 40 Statute at Large 411, that's where you're going to find the law, ladies and gentlemen. 40 Statute at Large 411. That's going to be your Trading with the Enemy Act. You want to get it from the archivist, and you want to read it directly from the fucking source. It is verbatim. And I'm telling you right now, it is the answer to your financial issues and problems. 40 Statute at Large 411 is a master key to everything financial. As soon as you comprehend it and understand what it is. It's a trust indenture. It is the law of the trust formed after 1871. As amended, is hereby amended to read as follows. So we see that they are now going to amend Section 5B. Now let's see how it reads after it's amended. The amended version of Section 5B reads, emphasis added, during time of war or during any other period of national emergency declared by the President, the president may, through any agency that B may designate or otherwise investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of license or otherwise, any transaction in foreign exchange, transfer of credit between or payments by banking institutions as defined by the president, and export, hoarding, melting, or earmarking of gold or silver coin or bullion or currency by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What just happened? And as far as commercial, monetary, or business transactions were concerned, the people of the United States were no longer differentiated from any other enemy of the United States. We had lost the crucial distinction. Comparing Exhibit 17 with Exhibit 19, we can see that the phrase, which excluded transactions executed wholly within the United States, has been removed from the amended version of Section 5B of the Act of March 9, 1933, Section 2, and replaced with by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. All monetary transactions, whether domestic or international in scope, were now placed at the whim of the Commander-in-Chief, otherwise known as the President of the United States, through the authority given to him by the Trading with the Enemy Act. I'm telling you, the Trading with the Enemy Act, as amended, 40 Statute at Large 411 Section 7E, ladies and gentlemen, is the trust indenture. The trust indenture is the law of the trust. And everything, ladies and gentlemen, is a trust. You must learn trust law to enforce your rights and to enforce the fact that you're a holder in due course. You're an entitlement holder. You're an heir. You're a beneficiary. Okay? And it's going to be found in the Trading with the Enemy Act, which is the law of the trust. It's the trust indenture. To summarize this critical point, on October the 6th, 1917, at the beginning of the America's involvement in World War I, Congress passed the Trading with the Enemy Act, empowering the government to take control over any and all commercial, monetary, or business transactions. Now, if you go read the 73rd Congress, First Session, Volume 77, Part 1, which is 1,176 pages, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that the way that they're articulating this is not quite particular enough. Because remember, the law is specific. Words have power and they have meaning. And so we want to use the actual language that is recognized verbatim from the archivist, from the archives. And what does it actually say? In that 1,176 pages, it says agriculture, industrial, or commercial activity. Those are the things they're governing. Agriculture, industrial, and commercial. All right? Act empowering the government to take control over any agricultural, industrial, or commercial, monetary, or business transactions conducted by the enemies or allies of the enemies within our continental borders. Remember, I told you that they made everybody enemy belligerent combatants. So the best way I can articulate this is for those of you that have ever been in a street fight, you understand just because 5 guys are standing in a circle around you with their hands up doesn't mean that they're not enemy belligerent combatants. And you're not going to take the risk of letting anybody get behind you, even though they have their hands up and they look innocent, until we can declare them to be non-belligerent, non-enemy combatants. Everybody gets an elbow, a fist, a knee to the nut, the gut, or the eyeball. All right? That's just how it rolls. If you're dumb enough to stand around me in a circle and I'm getting at it, you getting some too, because you ain't innocent until I can declare you incapacitated and no longer a fucking threat. So with that being said, everybody is considered an enemy because they're at war. They're at war with the people. They have a foreign army standing on our land. They owe us a very large debt. That act also defined the term enemy and excluded from that definition citizens of the United States. Well, no shit, they excluded citizens of the United States, but these guys aren't understanding why they excluded citizens of the United States. Citizens of the United States are employees. They're going along with this act. They're the ones that are going along with all this. They're the ones that stand to benefit from all of this. So citizens of the United States are excluded because they took an oath and their allegiance lies with Washington, D.C. See, under the Reorganization Act of 1871, all the states got new constitutions. All of them were operating outside the Republic and are subsidiary corporations of the parent corporation known as Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. So citizens of the United States, citizens of the United States are your public servants. Whether they have volunteered or they've taken an oath and they're being compensated, that's what the Trading of the Enemy Act protected. It didn't protect you from being perceived and deemed an enemy, belligerent combatant, or an ally of the enemies. It deemed their employment force, masquerading around as government, as not being enemies. Make no mistake about it, the people are the enemy of the United States. And the reason for it is because we floated them and allowed them to put a mortgage on everything we own so they could do international business. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. They got too much power. The American people fell asleep at the wheel. The politicians' greed led them to taking more and more and more. And the people's voice got quieter. And their movement got more still. And in a drunken stupor and lack of intellectual experience and the ability to communicate, the American people slowly became the subject, serf, slaves, enemy, belligerent combatants of the United States. When in reality, they're the entitlement holder, the preferred stockholder, the supreme investor, the preferred stockholder in the United States, due and owing stipends, dividends, derivatives, debentures, hediments, general tangibles, general intangibles, chattel security, trust residuals, trust residue, rents, profits, proceeds, futures, and annuities. Month after month after month are owed to you because you are a preferred stockholder in this business called the United States. And United States citizens are, in fact, employees that have made a pledge, an oath to go work for the United States. So citizens of the United States is just another way of saying employees of the United States or volunteers. In Section 5B of this act, we see that the president was given unlimited authority to control the commercial transactions, agricultural transactions, and industrial transactions of defined enemies. But we see that credit relating solely to transactions executed wholly within the United States, 10 square mile area, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, within the United States, were excluded from the controlling authority. What does that mean? That means the congressmen, the senators, the politicians didn't have to give up their gold. They excluded themselves from this. As transactions wholly domestic in nature were excluded from authority, the government had no extraordinary control over the daily business conducted by citizens of the United States, their buddies, their employees of the United States, because we were certainly not enemies. Citizens of the United States were not enemies of their country. That's right. Because they were employees. You are not a citizen of the United States. And maybe you are. Maybe you're an employee. Maybe you're have taken an oath, fill an office, and you work on behalf of the United Nations under the International Monetary Fund, under the Economic Stabilization Act. Maybe you are. If you fit that role, then perhaps. Tell you right now, everybody that ever enlisted in the military after 1871 has never, ever actually filled a proper oath out, and therefore they're private mercenaries. You've never taken the proper oath. Your Social Security juristic person has done so, but not you. Citizens of the United States were not enemies of their country in 1917, and the transactions conducted by citizens within this country were not considered to be enemy transactions. But in looking again at Section 2 of March 9th, 1933, Exhibit 17, we can see that the phrase excluding wholly domestic transactions has been removed from the amendment version and replaced by any person within the United States or any place subject to its jurisdiction. The people of the United States were now subject to the power of the Trading with the Enemy Act, October 6, 1917. I keep telling you, the Trading with the Enemy Act is so important. As amended, for the purpose of all commercial, industrial, and agricultural, monetary transactions, and in effect, all business transactions, we the people became the same as the enemy and were treated no differently. There was no longer any distinction. In this sense, they got it proper. It is important here to note that in the acts of October 6, 1917 and March 9, 1933, it states during time of war, or is an audible. Anytime you see or, you need to slow down. It means you got options, baby. During any other national emergency declared by the president. So we now see that the war powers not only included a period of war, but also a period of national emergency. Let's talk about what constitutes a national emergency, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we've got a war on hunger. We got a war on drugs. We got a war on drug cartels. We got a war on agriculture. We got a war on homelessness. We got a national banking emergency. We got a national agricultural emergency. See how easy it is to declare emergencies? We got half the East Coast that's been flooded. That's an emergency. That one's a natural emergency. There's always these perpetual causes for them to remain with this alleged source of authority and power. There will always forever be an emergency because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, they have had absolute power for entirely too fucking long. They will always create the problem to be your fucking savior and have a solution. That's why everything they do is planned 50 to 60 years in the future. They've created the problem. They've lit the fuse. They're standing back. They're watching the fuse burn to the powder keg. When it happens, they will be so quick to rush to you and have the solution in hand. And the people will grovel and beg for it. Psychological warfare 101, ladies and gentlemen. Create the problem and be the only fucking solution. And the people will beg for you. Take all our rights. Take all our freedom. Take all our power. Just make this horrible atrocity go away. Fix it. You have the answer. If you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. They're the beginning of the problem, and they always have the fucking solution. Well, let me tell you this. That corporation that's run rogue, masquerading around as government, is creating the problem, just like a narcissistic mate might cause you, and then at the same time offering you the solution while perpetuating you're the fucking problem. Period of national emergency as defined by the President of the United States. When either of these two situations occurs, the President may, through any agency, notice that, agency. I'll tell you right now, the FDA, the ATF, the DEA, the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, none of those organizations are authorized by we the people in the Organic Constitution. Congress was never granted the authority to create any of those organizations without our express written authority. And yet they exist today. They are a foreign occupying military force on our land, on our soil, under the guise of safety. And you know what they say? If you shall sacrifice freedom for safety, you shall have what? Neither. Through any agency that he may designate or otherwise investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of license or otherwise. Any transaction in foreign exchange, transfer of credit between or payments by banking institutions as defined by the president, and export, boarding, melting, or earmarking of gold or silver coin or bullion or currency by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This jurisdictional word here is very important to pay attention to. Where is the jurisdiction? And you find that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. In your local states, in your constitutions, you'll find the jurisdiction under the legislative branch, and it will tell you it's military forts, arsenals, bridges, roads, capitals, and lands owned by the state. That's where their jurisdiction is. It's very, very limited. What can the president do now to the people under this section? He can do anything he wants to do. It's purely at his discretion. And he can use any agency or any license that he desires to control it. This is called a constitutional dictatorship. This is why Slick Dick Bill Willie Clinton, the cocksucker that he is, smoked dope but never inhaled. What a fucking liar. Liar. Just a flat out fucking liar. Woof. Boy, you guys' choice in fucking elected politicians and leaders is fucking sickening. You know, if you don't like your government, understand that the government is a direct reflection of the society. So if you don't like your government, you probably don't like yourself either. But this is why Slick Dick Willie couldn't be impeached. Because he's the commander-in-chief under the executive branch and you can't fire the fucking boss. Don't care how many of you want to fire the fucking boss. If you work for me, I own the shit show and you can't fucking fire me. You can bitch all day long and put your complaint in the complaint box, but it will be to no avail. Because you don't have a constitutional republic. At least they're not operating in the constitutional republic. It's still there. It's still there. It's just waiting for we the people to ascend of the mind and realize what the fuck has gone wrong. Because we are ultimately the problem. In Senate document number 93549, Exhibit 20, Congress declared that a series of emergencies exists. At 48 Statute at Large 1, the exclusion of domestic transactions formerly found in the Act was deleted from Section 5B at this time. When they're talking about Section 5B, they're talking about the Trading with the Enemy Act of October 6, 1917. They made an amendment to it in 48 Statute at Large 1 to Section 5B. Our Congress wrote that in the year 1973, you notice how I tell you, they always go back, they wait for 50, 60, 70 years and come back and go, oh, we're so sorry, people. We fucked you in the ass dry with a cactus, but let us explain ourselves. And now that all the lineage that was affected directly by it has passed on, we'll now tell you guys the truth about how we fist fuck you 6 ways from Sunday. Let us explain it in the Congress assembled of 1973. Now let's find out about the Trading with the Enemy Act of October 6, 1917, quoting the Supreme Court decision, Exhibit 21, Storer versus Wallace, 1921. The Trading with the Enemy Act originally and as amended is strictly a war measure and finds its sanction in the provisions empowering Congress to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Constitutional Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, 11P 241. Remember, your Constitution. Congress shall have the power to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make all rules concerning the captures on the land and the water of the enemies, all rules. Now, it's important to understand that this was done after 1871. This isn't a legitimate Congress making this shit up. They're masquerading around as Congress. They look like Congress. They're all actually operating underneath the executive branch, under the commander-in-chief. The would-be Congress today is nothing more than a sad, sabby sap of fucking people who are merely advisors to the commander-in-chief in time of war. That means your judiciary is underneath the executive branch as well. And what is their duty now? Because it's not to enforce the republic for which we guaranteed. It's to enforce the bankruptcy under the auspice and for the enforcement of the office of the President of the United States under War Powers Act, under bankruptcy. Who are they bankrupt to? Who are they indebted to? We, the American people. We, the people. The members of the Union of States in the states assembled. In the several states. If that be the case, let us look at the memorandum of law that now covers Trading with the Enemy Act, the Memorandum of American Cases, and recent English cases on the law of the Trading with the Enemy Act, Exhibit 22, remembering that we are now the same as the enemy in this memorandum we read. Every species of intercourse, ladies and gentlemen, ain't frolicking around with midget strippers and hookers, okay? Intercourse is business. Industry, agricultural, and commercial business. Every species of business, intercourse, okay? Commercial, agricultural, and industrial with the enemy is illegal. The prohibition is not limited to mere commercial intercourse. This is why you sending envelopes through the mail with correspondence is actually illegal. It's considered a form of espionage. Because during time of military occupation, nothing can be sent in secret. So when you're sending it in vessels, envelopes, it's considered a foreign private communication and is technically illegal. This is the case of the Rapid 1814. Additionally, no contract is considered as valid between enemies, at least so far as to give them a remedy in the courts of either government, and they have, in the language of the civil law, Roman civil law, okay, this is the law of military occupation and force, no ability to sustain a persona standi, no standing. Persona standi is Latin. Standi, stande, standi, in judicio. In other words, we, the people of the several states, the Union of States, no longer have standing in a judicial venue. It's all been converted to Article 1, Section 8 venues. Article 4, military tribunals. There's no longer a judiciary after the Act of 1871. In other words, they have no personal rights at law in a court. This is the case of Julia 1813. In the next case, the case of the Sally 1814, Exhibit 23, we read the words, by the general law of prize means captured, looty and booty, ladies and gentlemen, prize. Property engaged in an illegal intercourse with the enemy is deemed enemy property. It is of no consequence whether it belongs to an ally or to a citizen. The illegal traffic stamps it with the hostile character and attaches to it all the penal consequences of enemy ownership. Penal bonds, penal code, penal sum. That's all military doctrine. That's all military code. That's all under war powers. After the Act of 1871, all done under executive order, which means the judiciary, legislative branch, and the executive branch all now become one under the executive branch, under the commander-in-chief. Reading further in the memorandum, again, from the case of the Rapid, the law of prize, looty and booty, ladies and gentlemen, piracy on the land, violation of Title 18, 1661, is part of the law of nations. And we'll talk about law of nations, law of surrender, law of nations 192, while maintaining your derogation of sovereignty. In it, a hostile character is attached to trade, independently of the character of the trader who pursues or directs it. Condemnation to the use of the captor is equally the fate of the property of the belligerent and of the property found engaged in anti-neutral trade. See, if you're considered neutral, you're still an enemy. Neutral trade is not impervious from being captured as prize and purported under presumption and assumption under maritime admiralty law and the law of war to be contributed and attributed to trading with the enemy. So they take it, they capture it. But a citizen or an ally may be engaged in a hostile trade and thereby involves his property in the fate of those in whose cause he earmarks or he embarks. Again, from the memorandum, Exhibit 24, the produce of the soil of the hostile territory, as well as the other property engaged in the commerce of the hostile power, as the source of its wealth and strength, are always regarded as legitimate prize for the taking. Make sense now? Foreclosures, repos, all that shit. It's all done under the War Powers Act, ladies and gentlemen. You're being presumed and assumed in maritime admiralty law. Under the DOD, under military force and occupation, a hostile takeover has happened, and you're considered to be an enemy belligerent combatant of the United States, and war has been levied against you without regard to the domicile of the owner. How can I affirm that? Well, it's very clear. No property can be taken without just compensation. When's the last time you've been compensated on the side of the road when your automobile was taken from you? See, just compensation is supposed to be had before they take off in it. They're supposed to cut you a fat daddy check right there. But what do you get instead? A cactus to the ass. Dry. Are they following their oath? Are they upholding their end of the bargain? Or is it a Steve Miller Band song gone wrong where they're taking the money and running? They want to shake your plums and your trees, and it's not for your fucking pleasure. It's to rob you high and dry. From the case Exhibit 25 of the William Bagley, 1866. In general, during war, contracts with or powers of attorney or agency from the enemy executed after outbreak of a war are illegal and void. Contracts entered into with the enemy prior to the war are either suspended or are absolutely terminated. Partnership with an enemy are dissolved. Powers of attorney from the enemy, with certain exceptions, lapse. Payments to the enemy, except to agents in the United States appointed prior to the war and confirmed since the war, are illegal and void. All rights of an enemy to sue in the courts are suspended. Well, sucks to suck, don't it? Because you unwittingly, unknowingly have filed a claim for which relief cannot be granted, and I can't explain to you why, and I don't have to give you a finding of facts and conclusions of law as you think you're entitled to, per se, your alleged constitution. Because, dipshit, you're not aware that we're in war. Now, bailiff, get him the fuck out of my court. Fucking guy thinks he knows something. You're not entitled to shit. How many of you experienced that? Lord knows I have. From Senate Report number 13, Exhibit 26, in which we find an act to define, regulate, and punish trading with the enemy, and for other purposes, we read, the trade of commerce regulated or prohibited is defined in sections A, B, C, D, and E, page 4, This trade covers almost every imaginable transaction and is forbidden and made unlawful except when allowed under the form of licenses issued by the Secretary of Commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, the first stop your birth certificate makes is the Secretary of Commerce, the Commissioner of Commerce. Page 4, Section 3, line 18. This authorization of trading under license constitutes the principal modification of the rule of international law. International law, why does it have force, weight, and effect? 1945, ladies and gentlemen, all seats of the alleged government were ceded to the United Nations. International law. Forbidding trade between the citizens of belligerents for the power to grant such licenses. All right, a license is issued to do something that it was otherwise considered illegal. Now you know why they say it's illegal to drive without a license, because they're operating under war powers. Soft martial law. There are three types of martial law. There's soft martial law, like a soft porn flick in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s on television, and 80s on the television. You know, you'd see the small of a woman's back, maybe a shoulder, and the scene would go black, and the next thing you'd see is the sun rising with a rooster crowing. It was left to your imagination. That's soft porn, soft martial law. You're left to believe you're still free, to a degree. Then there's the second stage of martial law, which is what you just exhibited and saw exhibited and were subject to over the 2 weeks to stave the curve. We need everybody to just stay home for 2 weeks to stave the curve of COVID. That was the secondary stage 2 of martial law. And then there's the third stage of martial law. Stay in your house, you'll be shot on sight. Curfew's at 8 o'clock. If you're not in your house at 8 o'clock and you don't have your papers to walk around the street, when we encounter you and you do not stop, you will be euthanized. That's full-blown martial fucking law. It's coming. Slow but sure, it's coming. For the power to grant such license and therefore exemption from the operation of law is given by the bill. Everything is done by a bill. The bill is the hypothecation of your credit. When they pass the bill, the debt gets raised. That's why it's important to read the Bill of Exchange Act of 1881 as amended in 1882 and adopted by all 50 states. The International Bill of Exchange Act that was adopted by the Law of Nations and the rest of the countries. It says no trade can be conducted or no intercourse can be conducted without a license because by mere definition of the enemy and under the prize law, what is that? Could that be civil asset forfeiture? This looks like drug money, and you're right, although it's not illegal to have $10,000 in cash on you, we find it probable that more than likely that we believe, that we think, we suspect that you're no longer entitled to this anymore. Because we think it's being used for nefarious activity. Although we can't prove it, we think, we believe, we feel. And our little drug dog over there said, yep, smells like dope. So it's now ours. You can sign this document voluntarily and we'll let you go peacefully down the road. Or don't sign it and we're going to arrest you. If you sign the document, you agree to release these funds to us. And we're going to be so nice as to let you take off with your automobile. That really happens, ladies and gentlemen. I've helped people fight those cases. That's reality. That's war powers. Theft by taking. Denial of due process of law. Forcing people to enter into a contract under threat, duress, and coercion is nothing more than slavery, peonage, bondage, involuntary servitude, which violates the Treaty of Ghent. Under the prize law, civil asset forfeiture, all intercourse is illegal. Meaning if they catch you doing something that they don't like to sustain your family or possibly gain, in allegedly this capital society that we have, this capitalist idea of society, which is nothing more than a charade. It's a mask. It's a facade, because we've truly been subject to socialism, a modified form of socialism, the illusion of freedom while implicating slowly socialism. That was the first case we looked at. Exhibit 22 wasn't it. So once we were declared enemies, all intercourse became illegal for us. The only way we could now do business or any type of legal intercourse was to obtain permission from our government by means of a license. Ladies and gentlemen, that violates Article 1, Section 10, the Ninth Amendment. The powers not delegated to the government are respectively reserved to we the motherfucking people. There's the enumerated law, and then there's the unenumerated law. We are certainly required to have a Social Security card. Who issues the Social Security card? It's not the Social Security Administration. Remember, administration falls underneath the executive branch, administering a bankruptcy. Okay? It's the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They issue the Social Security account, but only after an estate has been probated, created. You can't have an account without first having an estate. You can't have a debt without first having a credit. You can have credit without debt, and you can have an estate without an account, but you cannot have an account without an estate, and you cannot have a fucking debt without a credit. You can't have a trust without an estate. You can have an estate without a trust, but you can't have a trust without an estate. Very important to understand this. There are procedures, modes, process. Procedures, modes, and process. You got concurrent jurisdiction, auxiliary jurisdiction, and exclusive jurisdiction. You got public and you got private. You got martial law and you've got natural law, God's law, nature's God. There are two systems running concurrent. The public venue has a plethora, a multitude of jurisdictions, from military jurisdictions to admiralty jurisdictions to maritime jurisdictions, commercial jurisdictions, agricultural jurisdictions, industrial jurisdictions. Then on the private side, it's so simple and eloquent. A 6-year-old child can understand the private side. It's so pure in its nature because it is just that, the essence and eloquence of nature's God, God's law, natural law. Let's go back to the public side here, which is a license to work. You need permission to work. How does that sound? Being in America, believing this is the land of the free and the home of the fucking brave, to find out it's the land of the flea and home of the slave, because you need a license to do shit. To do fuck all. It's still that way today, ladies and gentlemen. It's still that way today. And driver's license, which gives the government the ability to restrict travel. So much for that freedom, liberty, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the enjoyment of property, which is their only fucking duty and job. All business in which we engage ourselves requires us to have a license, does it not? And you got guys like me that say, fuck you, here's to me. I will not get on my knees. I will not fucking comply. Some people articulate, well, Derek, we just don't have a choice. Tell you right now, somebody comes up to me at the dead nuts of midnight, puts a gun to my head and says, get on your knees, open your mouth, and suck my dick. I'll tell you what my headstone will not read. It will not read, he died a cocksucker. I promise you that. You always have a choice. Those choices aren't always desirable, mind you. But under the circumstances, know this, my headstone will not read, he died a cocksucker. I won't go out on my knees, ladies and gentlemen. You must stand up and be vigilant and stand tall and sound off like you got a pair for this illusion called freedom, or the next generation is fucked. You know, I listened to the elders. They was telling me when I was 13 years old, I was ostracized because I dropped out of school. I wasn't allowed to hang out with kids my own age because parents feared that I was going to be the epitome of prison, clandestine to be in prison. I was going to be the epitome of criminal activity in the village because, well, can't get right over there, ain't in school anymore, and he's going to end up in drugs and alcohol and all this other stuff. So my best friends at 13 years old were retired U.S. badass fucking Marines that didn't want to have a village idiot in the community. So they took me under their wing to keep me out of trouble because idle hands undoubtedly find their way into trouble. And it wasn't just these Marines that took me under their belt. It was a whole damn community of elders. I got slapped around more by the elders in the community than my folks put a belt to my ass. They saw me as their little project for whatever reason. Maybe because in the future they didn't want their car being broke into and robbed, or see me on a path that was less than desirable. Maybe it was because they believed in a young lad and their parents had not graduated from high school either, and they did pretty well for themselves. For whatever reason it was, they took me under their wing. Very fortunate. Couldn't pay for the education that I received. There isn't an institution or foundation to this day that will be able to provide anybody with that type of education for any amount of money. It's priceless. These people understood the true history, not what was conjured up in the legislature to force feed people to control the narrative. These people actually lived through it, went through Vietnam. They saw the lies as they unfolded. They knew the truth by the time they got home. Every day I'm thankful for them. They're all gone now. All of them of which spoke of a time that sounds so glorious today because the freedoms they had are almost unfathomable. They weren't regulated as far as drinking and driving. They weren't regulated as far as all the other stuff that we see today. It wasn't such a monetary thing to make sure everybody's in dire straits and dire trouble and within the court system and having to hire attorneys and forcing people to give up their life and their life savings and earnings. If they were pulled over on the side of the road and they didn't look like they had what it took to get home, the officer said, get in, find somebody to come get your car tomorrow, I'm taking you home. They didn't take them to the hoosegow. They didn't take them to jail. They weren't looking to profit from them and ruin people's lives for an ignorant mistake or making a bad decision. Today, it's quite different. Today, they create and manufacture reasons to create problems and controversy in your life because they're using the penal code and the penal bonds and the penal sums attached to it to generate new revenue under the new laws that created this new illusion of money or redefined what money is. Understand, they never redefined what a dollar is, ladies and gentlemen. They redefined what money is, what a new elastic currency will be, how it will be implemented and how it will be used. And it is used as a weapon against we, the people who remain ignorant. Once you gain this knowledge, it's kind of a blessing. It's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. It's bitter and it's sweet simultaneously. Returning once again to the Memorandum of Law, Exhibit 27, but it is necessary always to bear in mind that a war cannot be carried on without hurting somebody, even at times, our own citizens. The public good, however, must prevail over private gain. Wait a minute. That completely abolishes the illusion of capitalism. Private gain is what capitalism is based upon. So this is the encroachment that starts us on the socialistic path. As we said in Bishop versus Jones, 28 Texas 294, there cannot be a war for arms and a peace for commerce. Commerce, by its own definition, is war. Blessed be the peacemaker. Agree with thy adversary quickly, or the sheriff will scoop you up and the judge will certainly cast you to jail. Once you understand the Trading with the Enemy Act and you understand that it is a trust indenture, there is no need to argue about statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations because they don't apply to you. Guilty of the fact, innocent of the charges, bring forward the security so they can be properly endorsed and the taxes can be paid. Let's call it a day, boys and girls. One of the most important features of the bill is that which provides for the temporary taking over of the enemy property without just compensation. This is how you can prove they're operating under military war powers. They're taking your car on the side of the road. Tell shit dick, Officer Dudley Dick, the gun-toting moron with an IQ of 70 to cut you a fat daddy fucking check. You gonna take my property? Cut me a check. You want to know why you didn't have to cut you a check? This is not your fucking property. You were forced to register it under the Trading with the Enemy Act. Because under 73, the 73rd Congress, first session, volume 77, part 1, Congress, not only did they abrogate the gold, but they put a mortgage on all the property, every blade of grass, the seed in your loins, the eggs in your ovaries, and they mortgaged it all. That's why it's all got to be registered. For the greater good of the molehill, we're all going to forfeit everything and we're going to let these fucking dipshits, all 546 of them or 56 of them, whatever it is, run the helm, run the ship to do international business. And they guaranteed us that if we did that, that we would have this internal form of currency. Notes, drafts, bills of exchange, bankers' acceptance, trade acceptances, and contracts, ladies and gentlemen. And under 48 statute 48 statute at large 112, that it would be recognized that if the notes, drafts, bills of exchange, bankers' acceptance, trade acceptances, and contracts from the American people, the members of the Union of States, the several states that formed a more perfect union, would be honored at par value, dollar for dollar, on the face of the instrument. They sure have fallen short of that, haven't they? But there's good news, because if you understand the Trading with the Enemy Act is the trust indenture, and the trust indenture is the law of the trust, and you understand that you are one of we the people with your political domicile vested in the 10th Amendment, then you understand that they owe you a duty as a fiduciary trustee, that you're a grantor of all that property that allowed them to do international business, that you are not classified as a 14th Amendment United States citizen. I don't know. Maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. I hope someday, processing this information and thinking about it, that you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. I can only lead you to the water. I'm not in the business of packing your mouth full of salt to make you fucking drink. I can only lead you to it. You'll drink when you're thirsty enough, when you've been deprived of all your life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness, and rights, well, by that time, if you're ready to drink from this fucking fountain, it may be too fucking late. This point of law is important to keep in mind, for it authorizes the temporary takeover of enemy property. The question is, once the war terminates, the property must be returned. Mustn't it? That is the question. But remember, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Do you think these people want to give you back what you're rightfully entitled to? Do you understand what you're rightfully entitled to? The national debt belongs to we the people. Not because we owe it. It's because it's due and owing to us. The property that is confiscated and the belligerent right of the government during the period of war must be returned when war terminates. Ladies and gentlemen, since 1871, the United States has been in a perpetual conflict and war. Whether it's been the war on poverty, the war on drug cartels, the war on hunger, the war on homelessness, the war on God knows what, the war on fucking pronouns and common sense, the war against literacy. They don't want you to be literate, hence Common Core. They want you walking around looking like a damn fucking lunatic, completely and wholly uneducated. And they devised the scheme and built the system just for that purpose, to train you to be a monkey or less than a monkey, a Neanderthal, a heathen, one without God, one without moral fiber or a moral compass. 10-year-olds wanting to cut off their testicles because they think they're fucking a woman. God didn't make a mistake, son. You got testicles for a fucking reason. Be proud of that. You were born with about 50 less fucking problems in the world. Having testicles. Let us take the case of a ship in harbor. War breaks out. And the admiral says, I'm seizing your ship. Can you stop him? The answer to that is no. But when the war is over, the admiral must return your ship to you. This point is important to bear in mind, for we will return to and expand upon it later in the report. Reading from Exhibit 28, Senate document number 43, contracts payable in gold, written in 1933, they're going to be talking about the abrogation of the gold clause. The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government. Okay? In other words, all property is vested in the state by virtue of government, military hostile takeover, i.e., law amounting to mere user, which is otherwise, ergo, recognized as usufruct. And use must be in accordance with the law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. Again, when they're using the word necessity, they're telling you something. That's underneath the law of necessity, which trumps law. Necessity trumps law. It's a maximum of law. It's a maximum they use in military hostile takeovers. Who owns all the property? Who owns the property you call yours? Who has the authority to mortgage property? Another word for mortgage, ladies and gentlemen, is trust. A mortgage is a trust. Let us continue with a Supreme Court decision, Exhibit 29, United States versus Russell. Private property, the Constitution provides, shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. That is the peacetime clause, isn't it? Further emphasis added, extraordinary and unforeseen occasions arise, however, beyond all doubt. In cases of extreme necessity, in time of war or of immediate and impending public danger in which private property may be impressed into the public service or may be seized or appropriated to public use or may even be destroyed without the consent of the owner. Do you understand what they're talking about? They're telling you exactly what they've done. They're not hiding anything. This quote, and indeed this case, provides a vivid frustration of the potential power of the government. Now, let us return to the period of time of March 4th, 1933, and take a close look at what really occurred on March 4th, 1933. In his inaugural address, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the scallywag, rat in the woodpile, asked for the authority of the war powers and called a special session of Congress for the purpose of having those powers conferred to him. On March the 2nd, 1933, however, we find that the Herbert Hoover had written a letter to the Federal Reserve Board of New York asking them for recommendations for actions based on the overall situation at this time. The Federal Reserve Board responded with the resolution Exhibit 30, which they had adopted, and excerpt from which follows. Resolution adopted by the Federal Reserve Board of New York, whereas, in the opinion of the Board of Directors of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the continued and increasing withdrawal of currency and gold from the banks of the country has now created a national emergency. When was the Federal Reserve created? It was created in 1910. When was it enacted? 1913. When was it put in full force and effect? March 4th, 1933. I'm telling you, everything they do is calculated. Everything they're doing is projected 50 years into the fucking future. They always have the solution for the problem they've already fucking manifested and created, because they came up with that fucking problem 50 years before it happened. They manufactured it. They created it. The art of war. Psychological warfare. To usurp power otherwise not delegated to them. To find a way to take it. In order to fully appreciate the significance of this last quote, we must recall that in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Woodrow Wilson, that fucking scallywag, authorizing the creation of a central bank, the thought of which had already been noted in the Constitution. The basic idea of a central bank was, among other things, for it to act as a secure repository for the gold of the people. We, the people, would bring our gold to the huge, strong vault of the Federal Reserve, and we would be issued a note which said, in effect, that at any time we desire, we could bring that note back to the bank and be given back our gold, which we had deposited. Until 1933, that agreement, that contract between the Federal Reserve and its depositors was honored. Federal Reserve notes prior to 1933 were indeed redeemable in gold and or silver. After 1933, the situation changed drastically. In 1933, during the depths of the Depression, which was manufactured by the Federal Reserve, they've come out, Bernanke admitted it, smiling like a cocksucker that he is on TV, national television. We were the cause of the Great Depression, and you can rest assured we'll never do it again. As he keeps stroking your asshole like a violinist with a cactus dry. At the time when, because shortly after he made that speech, ladies and gentlemen, the crash of 2008, where they're just too big to fail. Too big to fail. That's why I can say that confidently, as that smug bastard said that on national television, and then 3 years later, the crash of 2008. At the time when we, the people, were struggling to stay alive and keep our families fed, the bankers began to say, people are coming in now, wanting their gold, wanting us to honor this contract we have made with them to give them their gold on demand, and this contractual obligation is creating a national emergency. Now remember, the reason that the state banks ended up getting taken off the playing field was because of J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan caused a run on the bank. All right? He caused pandemonium and panic. And because he was the one that was working with the Rothschilds to create that panic, the Rothschild banks and the J.P. Morgan banks had all the gold to satisfy their customers. So they still looked trustworthy, even though these scallywags were the ones that were devising the plan to see the fall of the Republic. Remember what Lord Mayor Rothschild said, I give a shit who makes the law, ladies and gentlemen, as long as I control and create the money. I could give a shit less who creates the law. What does that mean? What's that profound statement tell you? Laws don't mean shit when you got money. Laws are only created by man to affect the poor people or the less fortunate to keep them under control. When you have this fiat, this currency at your disposal, do you really give a shit about parking tickets? Fuck, write 1,000 of them while I'm having dinner. I don't give a shit. Right? Oh, if you're not wearing a mask, it's a $500 fine. I don't give a fuck. I'm rich, bitch. Right? Think about it. I'm just trying to plant some seeds, just trying to fucking help you out a little bit so you understand what's really transpiring here. But know this, you have the power to create the new form of money. Notes, drafts, bills of exchange, bankers' acceptance, trade acceptances, okay? Letters of credit. You are the creditor. So you can have the ideology of Lord Mayor Rothschild. I don't give a fuck who creates the laws here. There's no controversy. Guilty of the facts, innocent of the charges, but bring forward those securities so we can do the calculation on how much new currency we're creating in the system with the bonds. I don't care about your license attached to a penal code, a penal sum, statutes, code, city ordinances, rules, and regulations. Bring forward those fucking securities and the double bookkeeping entries, the assets and the liabilities, the debits and the credits, so we can balance the books and make sure the taxes are paid. I don't give a fuck about all that. But when you start speaking like me, they'll run and hide and play games. Because you're literally putting their nuts in a noose. They can spend the rest of their life in prison for tax evasion, money laundering, securities fraud, hypothecating your credit into existence without your express written consent. More on that later. How could that happen regarding the public papers of Herbert Hoover, Exhibit 31? Now, therefore, be it resolved that in this emergency, the Federal Reserve Board is hereby requested to urge the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, under executive authority, under the executive branch, a ministerial administrator of a bankruptcy, to declare a bank holiday Saturday, March 4th, and Monday, in the other words, the President Roosevelt, March 6th, excuse me. So from Saturday, March 4th, and Monday, March 6th. In other words, President Roosevelt was urged to close down the banking system and make it unthinkable or unavailable, make it unavailable for a short period of time. What was to happen during that period of time? Let me tell you what happened during that period of time. They rolled out the military on our land. Okay? Violation of the Clayton Act, violation of the Hobbs Act. It's a violation of the Constitution. Article 1, I believe it's Section 3. Third Amendment. No quartering soldiers in time of war or peace. Reading again from the Federal Reserve Board Resolution, Exhibit 31, we find a proposal for an executive order. Remember how I told you after 1871, It's all underneath the commander-in-chief. It's all being done by executive order. They're passing these acts and legislation, making it look like it is a legitimate government, but it is really a military hostile takeover under soft porn martial law. To be worded as follows. Whereas it is provided in Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917, Trading with the Enemy Act, 40 Statute at Large 411, as amended, that the President may investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of license or otherwise any transaction in foreign exchange and the export, hoarding, melting, or earmarking of gold or silver coin or bullion or currency. Why? Because the United States, in order to stay in business and continue to do business internationally, was out of fucking gold. And if we, the people, who were becoming astutely aware that they weren't running the operation properly, went and took our gold and silver back, they wouldn't have a way to interact internationally for international trade. They created the mess and then robbed us to provide the solution and the problem that they created. This is what created a trust. This is why the Trading with the Enemy Act is the trust indenture. We had to give them something of value, and they gave us no satisfaction. You know that song, Can't Get No Satisfaction? Okay? When they took something of value from us, the gold and the silver, that's the shiny shit that raccoons pay attention to. Like a gum wrapper in a mason jar with nails in the lid. That damn raccoon will not let go of that shiny fucking piece of tinfoil to save his fucking life, literally. As you're walking up to club him in the back of the head like a fucking seal pup, he will hang on to that son of a bitch because he's greedy and don't know no better. That shiny shit distracts everybody. So yes, did the abrogation of the gold happen? Yes. Is it the important point of all of this? No. The most poignant point of it all is they mortgaged everything, ladies and gentlemen. They claimed it all. The gold and silver was the shiny shit to distract you from the following words that preceded the abrogation of the gold clause, which was that it would be a mortgage on all the homes and for other purposes and other property of the people, and would be a mortgage. And the new currency would be backed by the people of the nation. You're the form of currency. You're what they're borrowing against. That's why there's a birth certificate issued on your happy ass. It's a warehouse receipt. It's a bill of lading. It's proof that they owe you a really large motherfucking debt. Now, in any normal usage of the American language, the standard accepted meaning of a series of 3 asterisks after a quotation means that what follows also must be quoted exactly, doesn't it? If it's not, that's a fraudulent use of the American language. At that point, where that 3 asterisk began, what did the original act of October 6, 1917 say? Referring back to Exhibit 19, we find that the remainder of Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917 says, other than credits relating solely to transactions to be executed wholly within the United States. This portion of Section 5B specifically prohibited the government from taking control of we the people money and transaction, didn't it? Well, we've already been through that because we're not citizens of the United States. So it did not. However, let us now read the remainder of Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917 as amended March 4, 1933 in Exhibit 17. By any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Comparing the original with the amended version of Section 5B, we can see the full significance of the amended version, wherein the exclusion of domestic transactions from the powers of the Act was deleted, and any person became subject to the extraordinary, extraterritorial powers conferred by the act. Further, we can now see that the usage of the asterisk was, in all to likelihood, meant be deliberately misleading, if not fraudulently introduced in its nature. Further, in the next section of the Federal Reserve Board's proposal, we find that anyone violating any provisions of this act will be fined not more than $10,000 or imprisoned for not more than 10 years or both. A severe enough penalty at any time, but one made all the more harsh by the economic conditions in which most Americans found themselves at the time. And where were these alterations and amendments to be found? Not from the government itself initially, no. They are first to be found in the proposal from the Federal Reserve Board of New York, a banking institution, ladies and gentlemen. Let us recall the chronology of events. Herbert Hoover, in his last days as President of the United States, asked for a recommendation from the Federal Reserve Board of New York, and they responded with their proposal. We see that President Hoover did not act on the recommendations and believed the actions were neither justified nor necessary. Appendix Public Paper of Herbert Hoover, page 1088. Let us see what happened. Remember, on March 4th, 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was inaugurated as President of the United States, and on March 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt called for an extraordinary session of Congress to be held on March 9th, 1933, as can be seen in Exhibit 32. Whereas, public interest requires that the Congress of the United States should be convened in extra session at 12 o'clock noon on the 9th day of March 1933 to receive such communication as may be made by the executive. All right, this is Commander-in-Chief. This is under executive order. All right, under Emergency War Powers Act. On the next day, March 6, 1933, President Roosevelt issued Proclamation 2039, which has been included in this report. Starting at the bottom of Exhibit 32, in Exhibit 32, we find the following. Whereas there have been heavy and unwarranted withdrawals of gold and currency from our banking institutions for the purpose of hoarding. Ladies and gentlemen, the American people were realizing they were being robbed blind, fucked in the ass dry by a cactus, and they were going to the banks and they were taking their gold back because they had lost faith and trust and belief in their trustees. And so what did they do? Declared an emergency. Said if you go to get what's rightfully yours, we'll club you over the head, you get hit with a $10,000 fine, you might spend 10 years in prison. All right? They created the problem. They shirked their responsibilities, were derelict in their duties, breach of trust, breach of fiduciary duties. Okay? They engaged in mixed war against the Constitution. They violated the rights of the people. They took your property, absent your consent, denial of due process of law, violation of the 4th Amendment, 5th Amendment, 7th Amendment, 6th Amendment, 8th Amendment, subjected the people to cruel and unusual punishment, did not provide just compensation, declared an emergency for the very problem they fucking created. But there's a solution. There's a remedy here. See, if all we do is talk about the issue, then all you're effectively doing is fucking bitching, and ain't nobody got time for that. I'm telling you, the Trading with the Enemy Act is your trust indenture. It is your financial remedy. You want freedom, you need to find financial liberty. Financial freedom is freedom. Just remember Lord Mayor Rothschild. I care not who makes the laws, as long as I'm in control of the fucking money. I don't care about your bullshit. Because politicians can be bought off. Because officers on the side of the road can be paid off. Because I'll mortgage your house and I'll foreclose on you if you issue me a fucking ticket. And you have that power. You just need to acquire the knowledge so you can stand on a solid foundation and enforce it. They can never pay back the American people what they owe. This is perpetual and forevermore will be this way, so long as the American people continue to educate one another and share freely this information. Right at the beginning, we have a problem. And the problem rests in the question of who should be the judge of whether or not my gold on deposit at the Federal Reserve, with which I have a contract which says, in effect, that I may withdraw my gold at my discretion, is being withdrawn by me in an unwarranted manner. That's a violation of Article 1, Section 10. The obligation of contract shall not be impeded by government. They again violated the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. This is why T. McFadden was so fucking pissed off. This is why James Traficant was telling you the truth. Here we are, Congress assembled, administering the largest bankruptcy the world has ever seen as trustees of the American people. They're like, oh my God, somebody cut the feed, cut the feed. Holy shit, he's on C-SPAN telling everybody the truth. We got to get rid of this guy. The only reason James Traficant told the truth about what was going on is because his buddy was over in Israel being held against his will for a fucking crime that wasn't justifiable for holding the man, in his humblest opinion. And he couldn't get enough of Congress, who all have dual citizenship with fucking Israel, to get his buddy out of Israel where he was being tortured and imprisoned. That's why James Traficant went rogue. And they made sure James Traficant wasn't around much longer after that. Remember, the people of the United States were in dire economic straits. Why were they in dire economic straits? Well, just ask that fucking shit dick Bernanke. Go back and look it up on YouTube, where Bernanke admits the Federal Reserve did create the crash, the economic crash in 1929. They manufactured the fucking problem. At this point, if I had gold at the Federal Reserve, I would consider withdrawing as much of my gold as I needed for my family and myself, a warranted action. But the decision was not left up to we the people. It is also important to note that it is stated that the gold is being withdrawn for the purpose of hoarding. Hoarding. Not out of the law of necessity. See, when you use the law of necessity, they say, no. Not out of necessity you're taking the gold. You're a hoarder. You're an evildoer. You don't believe in our cause. He's not one of us, boys. He must be against us. We'll declare him a fucking enemy. And anybody that talks like him, they're an enemy too, and we'll put him in jail. $10,000 fine. Can you imagine a $10,000 fine in 1933? That's like millions of dollars today in value. Because remember, the fiat currency from the day that it's created is designed by nature to implode and be worth less and less year in and year out. In 1933, 10 grand was millions of dollars today in value. And the only reason it's millions of dollars today in value is because that's how much the dollar, the Federal Reserve note, has depreciated since its inception. The significance of this phrase becomes clearer when we reach Proclamation 2039. Now, 2039 is very important. Don't slumber on it. Don't sleep on it. 2039, you need to go read it. This is where it's established that you're a private banker. Everybody and everything has been thrust into commerce, agriculture, and industry and is considered a financial institution. Wherein the term hoarding is inserted into the amended version of Section 5B, the term hoarding was not to be found in the original version of Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917, the Trading with the Enemy Act, which I keep telling you guys is in fact the trust fucking indenture. It's the law of the trust. It was a term which was used by President Roosevelt to help support his contention that the United States was in the middle of a national emergency, and his assertion that the extraordinary powers conferred to him by the War Powers Act were needed to deal with that emergency. Let us now go on to the middle of Proclamation 2039 at the top of the next page, Exhibit 33. In reading from Exhibit 33, we find the following. Whereas it is provided in Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917, 40 Statute at Large 411 as amended, that the President may investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of licenses or otherwise any transaction in foreign exchange and export, hoarding, melting, or earmarking of gold or silver coin or bullion or currency, exactly as was first proposed by the Federal Reserve Board of New York, Exhibit 31. If we return to 48 Statute 1, Exhibit 17, Title 1, Section 1, we find that the amended Section 5B with its added phrase, by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Is this becoming clearer as to exactly what happened? On March 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt called for an extra session of Congress, and on March 6, 1933, issued Proclamation 2039, Exhibits 32 and 33. On March 9th, Roosevelt issued Proclamation 2040. 2040 wasn't implemented until the following year because Proclamation 2039 was enacted and in full force and effect from 1 year once it was created. On March 9th, Roosevelt issued Proclamation 2040. We looked at Proclamation 2039 on Exhibits 32 and 33, and now on Exhibit 33A, let's see what Roosevelt is hiking about and in Proclamation 2040. Whereas on March 6, 1933, I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States of America, by proclamation declared the existence of a national emergency and proclaimed a bank holiday. We see that Roosevelt declared a national emergency and a bank holiday. Let's read on. Whereas, under the Act of March 9, 1933, all proclamations heretofore and hereafter issued by the President of the United States pursuant to the the authority conferred by Sections 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917, as amended, are approved and confirmed. This section of the proclamation clearly states that all proclamations heretofore or hereafter issued by the President are approved and confirmed, citing the authority of Section 5B of the Trading with the Enemy Act, the key words here being all, and approved further. Whereas said national emergency still continues, and it is necessary to take further measures exceeding beyond March 9, 1933, in order to accomplish such purposes. We again clearly see that there is more to come, evidenced by the phrase, further measures extending beyond March 9, 1933. Could this be the beginning of a new deal? Possibly a one-sided deal. How long can this type of action continue? Let's find out. Now, therefore, I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States of America, in view of such continuing national emergency, and by virtue of the authority vested in me by Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917, 40 Statute at Large 411, as amended by the Act of March 9, 1933, do hereby proclaim, order, direct, and declare that all the terms and provisions of said proclamation of March 6, 1933, and the regulations and orders issued thereunder are hereby continued in full force and effect until further proclamation by the President. Okay, at this point, they have made this perpetual, year in and year out. Okay? At this point, we are now in a perpetual state of national emergency where everything is done under executive order, under executive fiat, administering a bankruptcy, under the War Powers Act, which means the judiciary operates under the executive branch, the legislator operates under the executive branch now. They become the advisors and the administrators under the executive branch, administering the bankruptcy on behalf of the office of the President of the United States. I can't be any more clear than that. You won't learn this shit in college. You ain't going to learn this at Yale. You're not going to learn this at Duke, Princeton, Harvard. You're only going to learn this stuff from people who really put their nose to the grindstone and get out there and do the research. We now understand that the Proclamation 2039 of March 6, 1933, and Proclamation 2040 of March 9, 1933 will continue in perpetuity until such time as another proclamation is made by the Commander-in-Chief, not the President. Because remember, after 1871, it's always the Commander-in-Chief. Note that the term the President is not specific to President Roosevelt. It is a generic term which can equally apply to any president from Roosevelt to the present and beyond. Because it's an office. It's a trust. The trust indenture is being laid. We gave them something of value. They gave us no satisfaction in performance. They became trustees. They now owe us a motherfucking duty to offset, discharge any and all debts. 40 Statute at Large 411 Section 7E. They're not going to roll over like a dog in heat. You're going to have to press the issue. You may have to bring claim. You may have to bring suit to enforce it. They're not just going to go, oh, you listen to Derek rant for fucking 10 hours and now you know something? Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, you bet. We're just going to go ahead and zero balance that for you. God bless you. It's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to fucking fight for it. Freedom isn't free. It requires vigilance. It's a duty incumbent upon you. So here we have President Roosevelt declaring a national emergency. We're now beginning to realize the full significance of those words and closing the national banks for 2 days by executive order. All right? Not operating as the President of the United States of America, operating as the Commander-in-Chief under war powers, under executive order. That's why it's so important to go to Executive Order 100 and look at the Lieber Code, Article 2, Article 31, and Article 38, and you will understand why the Trading with the Enemy Act is a trust fucking indenture. Further, he states that the proclamations bringing about these actions will continue in perpetuity, forever and a day, in full force and effect until such time as the President, the Commander-in-Chief, and only the President, and only the Commander-in-Chief, because remember, under the War Powers Act, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, under the amendment in 1933 of the Trading with the Enemy Act, so long as there's been declared a national emergency, he doesn't need the approval of Congress. He doesn't need the approval of the people. He doesn't need the approval of the Senate. He doesn't need the approval of the House of Representatives. He could do whatever he wants because he's the biggest swinging dick in the village. I don't think you people quite comprehend what the fuck really happened. Until such time as the President, and only the President, changes the situation. It is important to note that the fact that these proclamations were made on March 6, 1933, 3 days before Congress was due to convene its extra session, yet references are made to such things as the amended Section 5B of October 6, 1917, which is the Trading with the Enemy Act, which had not yet even been confirmed by Congress. President Roosevelt must have been supremely confident of Congress's confirmation of his actions. And indeed, we find that confidence was justified. For on March 9, 1933, without individual congressmen even having the opportunity to read for themselves the bill they were to confirm, Congress did indeed approve the amendment of Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917. Remember that cunt Nancy Pelosi? Well, you guys, we can't really, hold on, I need my fucking bottle. Where's my bottle of gin? Who's got my fucking gin?
Fuck it, tequila will work without the worm. Thank you. Okay, before, ladies and gentlemen, we can read the bill, we have to sign it into law. Then we can read it and figure out what the fuck's in it.
Does that make any sense? Because that's what they did. That's what they did here. That's what T. McFadden was so pissed off about. Who the fuck wrote this bill? You expect me to just blindly trust you in this alleged declared emergency and just blindly trust that whoever put this together, and keep in mind, nobody in Congress even knows who wrote this bill. We only got to figure out who it was after it was enacted, and we find out that it's none other than the Federal Reserve Board of Governors and Commissioners of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Boy, did our servants fail us. Boy, did our oath takers engage in treason and mixed war against the Constitution, aid and abet the enemy belligerent combatant known as the banking system. But there's a remedy. Again, if I wasn't so sure and confident in the remedy, and I didn't know the remedy existed, all I'd be doing is wasting your time bitching about shit. But I believe in solutions, ladies and gentlemen. People come to me with problems, and I find fucking solutions. All right? I always tell people, you're going to come to me with your problem, you better have 3 fucking viable solutions to your problem. Otherwise, all you're doing is bitching, and I ain't got time to listen to that. Don't come to me and cry about how you fucked shit up. Come to me and say, I fucked up. Okay, great. We've accomplished that. You've established that you fucked up. What are the 3 viable solutions that you can see? And if I can see something better, I will provide a solution as well. Or maybe out of the 3 proposed solutions that you think you have, we can form one that will work. Referring to the public papers of Herbert Hoover, Exhibit 34, and again, remember, this was submitted into a United States Supreme Court case. They hid it from the people. Not all Supreme Court cases, not all court cases in general are published to the general public. They're quiet. They don't want the general masses figuring this out. They like it the way it is. They're a little higher on the hog than the rest of us. They got no reason to upset the apple cart at this point. Heaven forbid you be able to support your family without having to work 50 hours a fucking week and have 3 different jobs just to stay afloat. It might give you too much time on your hands and you might read a book, and that scares the shit out of them. Referring to the public papers of Herbert Hoover, Exhibit 34, that those speculators and insiders were right with plain enough later on. This first contract of the money changers with the New Deal netted those who removed their money from the country a profit of up to 60% when the dollar was debased. These money changers, this is where they show you that they harvested we the people's equity. They hedged it. Hedge funds, futures, commodities. All right? They bet against you. And they prevailed. And they reaped a reward of almost 60%. While people were standing in fucking bread lines and soup lines trying to feed their fucking families. And they robbed the American people fucking blind. And the Congress, House of Representatives, the Senate, and the Judiciary all went along with it. Where had the gold gone? Our gold had already been moved offshore. The gold was not in the banks. Remember how I keep telling you guys about the Social Security Administration Act, lodged under Title 42? More specific, Title 42, United States Code 7, not enacted into positive law. That's underneath the executive branch. Now you understand why it's there. Then, later on, we have, after 45, we have the Economic Stabilization Fund that's created. And that's where they really got rid of all the gold. Bye, Felicia. It's gone. See ya. And when we, the people, lined up at the door attempting to have our contracts honored, the deception was exposed. What happened then? The laws were changed to prevent us from asking again, and the military was brought in to protect the Federal Reserve. We, the people, were declared to be the same as public enemy and placed under military authority. First thing a thief's going to do when he sees you walking down the road after he robbed you is prepare himself for battle. And he might hire a couple jackboot thugs to protect himself, all while proclaiming, "You didn't get robbed. Settle down, son. I'm just merely borrowing it. I intend to give it back to you, and I know I didn't ask, but in certain circumstances, it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, and this is for your own good." That's what happened. Just so you're aware. Again, there's a solution. When we come back, my voice needs a little break. We'll be talking about the 48 Statute at Large 1, Exhibit 35. Again, this documentation was sent to me. There's some things in here that I've tried to provide clarity on that are not correct in their assessment, although I understand why they once thought it to be correct, because I once had that same frame of mind. My research into this subject matter is very vast, very deep, and extraordinarily fucking thorough. So the corrections that I'm making to this document, I understand why the court may not have rendered a decision. They drew some conclusions that are incorrect, and therefore the document in and of itself is incorrect, and they would not move forward on those issues until those issues would have been cleared up. And they didn't specifically, it doesn't look like they were using those issues for to seek clarity in any one point, shape, or another. But when we come back later on this evening, like I said, I'm going to take a 15-minute break and rest my vocal cords to get a little wound up. We'll go through the rest of this. We're at page 19. It's 41 pages long. There are people out there currently right now looking for those exhibits for me. Again, this is the first time I'm reading through this. They had went back and checked the source of all this information. And I can validate it only because I've already been through all this information 10 dozen times. And so I'll make the corrections where I need it. I almost don't even need them to go grab the exhibits because I know where everything is that they're talking about in this document. This is a transcript from a court, and I find it very interesting. And so hopefully this will help you guys out. When we come back, we'll go through the rest of the 40-page document. Like I said, we're on page 19, or the end of page 19. This was published 10/31 of 2024. 10/31 of 2024. And so when we come back, we'll be touching on that, and I'll share with you guys the golden ticket, the remedy for you. Gibson's, Henry R. Gibson, Suits and Chancery. What is it? Subsection 963, 964, 965, exoneration, substitution, subrogation, and suretyship. Okay, 40 Statute at Large 411, Section 7E. That is your fucking golden goose. You just have to know how to be able to enforce it, how to articulate it, because they are going to test you. They're not just going to let you run around with the keys to the kingdom if you're irresponsible. Is it right in what they're doing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. You guys be the judge, ultimately, at the end of the day. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. And it's all due in part to the men and women who so graciously spent time, year in and year out, death by 1,000 paper cuts, studying this material far before the advent of technology of the internet, which means they were in the law libraries, thumbing through thousands of pages of books a year just to put all this together for you guys. So we thank them for their servitude and their selflessness, and we'll be back with you guys here after a bit.